have 1, 2, 3. Good evening. This is the 7 p.m. special meeting of the Common Council, the Charter Revision Commission workshop. I don't know what that was. A little more audio. All right. So we're going to just go down the agenda. And after we do public participation, I kind of want to go over how I think tonight's discussion should go in terms of just order and procedure. But Irene, why don't you start off with the roll call?
Mr. Burnett, Mr. Goldstein,
Here.
Mr. Lopez,
Here.
Ms. Najolski-Eichner,
Present.
Ms. Smith, Ms. Ayers, Mr. Seed,
Present.
Mr. Wiggins,
Here.
Ms. Young,
Here.
Ms. Edie,
Here.
Ms. Wennerstrand,
Here.
Ms. Dunn, Mr. Sutton,
Present.
Mr. Frere,
Yeah.
Ms. Shanahan,
Here.
Mr. Burnett, Ms. Smith, Ms. Ayers, and Ms. Dunn. We have 11 present. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Irene. Are there
Thank
any
you.
members of the public who wish to make comment tonight? I only see one attendee. If you wish to speak, raise your hand. If not, going once, going twice, we will close public participation. And I realize that, given the sort of the fast inclement weather here, we made a decision to make this meeting all Zoom. I thank everyone for being on their phones and being accommodating. And I see Councilmember Burnett is here for the record. And I apologize if there are any members of the public who were inconvenienced by the change to the all Zoom meeting. But we wanted to do it to make sure that everyone is as safe as possible. And so we're here. So I just very briefly, before we sort of get into the substance, here's kind of how I want this to go. Part of the goal tonight is to discuss any issue that anyone wants to discuss. The other is to make sure that we begin to figure out what we have consensus on, because as Steve will be drafting the resolution, it's important for us to sort of check off what we have consensus on and what we'll need to vote on at our meeting on the 22nd and sort of make a decision up or down as a council. So the way I would like to start this is go first through the Charter Revision Commission's recommendations. We do not need to go through every single specific recommendation as that has been done at prior workshops, but we do, if there are specific questions or items that we want to discuss article by article, I think that's the best way to do it. A lot of these are smaller, sort of more technical changes, and then there are certainly items up for discussion. So that's, and then after the discussion of the recommendations of the Charter Revision Commission, any amendments proposed by members of the council. So does anyone have questions before we get started? Okay. So I'd like to start here. We have, obviously, there's no changes in Article 1 from the recommendations for the Charter Revision Commission. Article 2, there were a number of edits made in 2023, so I don't believe there are any real changes there. Article 3, and I just want to one thing, as Councilmember Young, I want to be cognizant of your own, recusal preferences. I suggest, unless anyone disagrees, that we cabin discussion of the 4-year term to the end if we need to have further discussion. Is that all right with everyone? Okay. So putting a pin in the 4-year term question. Are there any questions about any of the recommendations in Article 3 that we need to that we should or people want to discuss now? And as a reminder, there were 2 recommendations. One regarding formalizing the practice of documenting reapportionment of council districts by ordinance, and then increasing the number of council members to 20 by adding 1 more district member for each council district. Those were the 2 recommendations. Does anyone want to say anything regarding any of the recommendations made in Article 3?
So just to understand, we're going to vote those up or down at the July 22nd meeting?
Yeah, that's my understanding in terms of if there are things we are going to reject. And Steve, I don't know if you want to sort of shed perspective here, say if we are not accepting a specific recommendation of the Charter Revision Commission, is that something that we need to vote specifically at the meeting, or is that something that can be put into the resolution if there's a consensus that we're not going to accept a recommendation?
Let's be careful about how we use the word recommendation. You have before you a draft charter, and it's a proposed draft charter. You are now going to be making recommendations back to them. So if there are things in that draft that you are not comfortable with, you will recommend that they modify it, delete it, change it, whatever. So if you were opposed to the 4-year term and there was a consensus of opposition to the 4-year term, the recommendation resolution next week would reference the section and say we would like to retain the current 2-year term as opposed to the 4-year term. So you're going to be making the recommendations to them. So if you don't like something, you would recommend that they delete it.
Does that make sense?
And if they decide that they're still going to do it, then it goes on to the ballot?
No, I'll finish. Thank you, Lisa. That's a good question. So what happens is they're going to go through next week. There's going to be a conferral meeting, or not next. Yeah, probably the end of next week. There will be a conferral meeting where the leadership of the council will sit with the commission, go through the recommendations. So the council will have a very clear, the commission will have a very clear understanding of what the council's recommendations are. What I tried to do throughout the process is to make sure that council leadership is very involved in an interplay with the commission so that we can end up in a situation when it comes back to you where we have a consensus document, you could approve their final draft. But if they disagree with you, they can keep the 4-year, let's use the 4-year term. They can keep the 4-year term in there. It then comes back to you and you get the final say and you can reject it at your last meeting. And so the council has the final word on everything in the final report and those items that will be on the ballot in November. Now, when it comes back to you at the end, and that's why it's important in this next stage for council leadership to be involved formally or informally in this process, you cannot amend something. So if there's an element of the 4-year term, if it comes back with the bifurcated 4-year term or the bifurcated election process, where the council's in one cycle, the other cycle, you can't merge them into one cycle at that point. For that to occur, that would have to occur when it goes to the council, and the council would have to send it back to you that way if you wanted to go with something like that.
Jalen, then Lisa.
I say, as we go through the chapters, are we going to talk about amendments now, or just wait until after we go through the recommendations?
My thought was waiting till the end to discuss amendments, unless anyone has a significant disagreement with that. I realize that there will be, that way I figured we're dealing with what the Charter Revision Commission suggests first, or what's in their draft charter first, and then we talk about any amendments we want to make. Unless anyone has a significant disagreement or thinks I'm wrong for some reason, let me know. But that was sort of my thought.
I have a thought. Sorry, I'm not trying to skip
No,
you.
it's okay.
I'm not trying to skip you, Lisa. This is a big document For me, I feel like if we go through this section and if there's an amendment in this section, we have that discussion, we do what we do, and then it's done with, and we move to the next. Instead of having things linger, organizational wise, I think that just helps a little bit.
Look, if-
But whatever, I'm
I'm
taking.
not wed- look, I'm willing to be obviously willing to be accommodating, and if you think that's a better system, and if everyone here thinks it's a better system, then so be it. Like I'm, I want to do whatever is the most efficient for everyone else here. So
I
Yeah.
still have a question about process. If that's okay.
yeah, go for it.
So Steve, I just want to understand, so it goes back to the commission. So one of the other things that we were concerned about was how to appear in the ballot. So do we decide that some things are broken out separately? Because we don't want maybe to have it all an up and down vote on the entire. So can you explain
That-
how we?
yeah.
hash
So
that?
once you approve whatever you approve, it is your decision as a council, and I'll be talking to leadership, and probably trying to reach a consensus as we have a sense of what the package that is coming from the commission is going to look like. I think that leadership needs to work with all of you to try to figure out whether you want to have one or multiple questions. I don't think you should have a lot of questions, but I think you can break them out, but that is entirely a council decision. The commission can make a recommendation. I usually tell them, that's not your job. You got plenty of work to do. Leave it to the council. The council will know politically what the difficult issues are, and will be able to make the judgment as to what should be presented to the public in what way. But it's your decision. Is that, Lisa, did I answer your question? Okay, good.
Okay. Coming back to Article 3, are there any questions or discussion that we want to have regarding anything regarding Article 3 with the exception of the 4-year term item?
Can I
Steve?
raise something? Do you want
Yes.
to go back to Article 1? I think that Johan had a item for Article 1. He wanted to change the name of the council from the Common Council to the City Council. And so if you're going to go sequentially, there was nothing in Article 1, but he had something in Article 1. And also there's some language that he has with regard to use of terms. It's more of a legal issue that if you do change the number, he wanted to have language in here that makes it clear that the change in title should not affect validity of any actions, ordinances, or decisions taken by the legislative body under its formal name. So there's really two related items pertaining to Article 1, change Common Council to City Council, and then have that use of terms language to make sure that the integrity of the work that was done prior is preserved. Did I explain that well, John?
Yes, Steve. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Does anyone here have any comments, questions, or discussions on Johan's amendment, Nicole?
My question is in the changing from city council to, did you say Norwalk Council?
Common Council to
Common-
City Council.
Common Council, City Council. Can maybe Johanna, who I don't know. Can someone tell me the rationale behind it, please?
Yeah, sure. My thinking was, number one, we're not in medieval Europe, and number two, city council is actually, it's a lot more used throughout. It's a more recognizable term, throughout the country and stuff. So that's really my only rationale. And so a lot of times, I remember meeting a lot of people and a lot of constituents, and then being really confused as to what the Common Council actually is. And so when I say city council, they're like, "Oh, okay, I completely understand." So that's simply the rationale.
Greg.
Yes, thank you. I think in our last meeting, when we discussed this item, most were supportive of it, but I think a question did come up in terms of if there was any financial implications in this name change, and I'm not sure if that assessment was done.
Yeah, Greg. Yeah. So yeah, that's one of the things that I mentioned to to Steve was to ensure, well, not only, actually, we did not really specifically talk about the financial aspect, but we kind of talked about, as you mentioned earlier, if it has any impact on any other work that the council has done or will do. So Steve, actually back to you. That's a good question from Greg. Is there any sort of financial implication? I can't think of anything, but do you?
Well, whatever costs there are in changing the name on the wall, changing your stationery. I don't know if those are the kinds of issues Greg is talking about, but from a fiscal perspective,
that would be accurate. That's what I was
Yeah.
referring to. So I don't think that
Yeah.
would be a Steve request. I think that would be an administration request to see, what would be involved in making those changes. Similar to the way we a few years ago changed the logo from to I Love Norwalk. What was the financial implications in making all of that signage change? So not a big ask, but one I think that we should ask in making this change.
Greg, absolutely. We can definitely ask the administration, the city, to see if maybe, if they bring up something that we're missing, but we can certainly do that before we decide to vote on it.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Any other discussion on this item or any sort of preliminary thoughts here? Well, not preliminary. I mean, they're just thoughts. All right. Why don't we, because part of this is also assessing sort of where we are on this, so we can, so Steve
that's what
can,
Greg's-
there we
yeah.
go. I saw you.
Yeah, okay.
How many people, as I understood, as Greg, I think, characterized correctly, most of us were generally in support of that change. Is there anything we don't know? Do people feel the same way as they did with the last time this has been discussed?
Are you asking that whether or not we want to increase the number of councilmen to 20 and things
No,
like?
I'm asking simply about the name change.
Oh, the name change. Okay.
Changing it from the Norwalk Common Council to the Norwalk City Council. Nora.
Can I make a suggestion? I know that this is hard because we're not taking votes, but could the phrasing perhaps be that if anyone has an objection to let folks know? Because I think
Sure,
otherwise,
because that's basically where I was trying to go. Because, and I thank you, Nora. I appreciate that. If anyone has any objection to changing the name from the Norwalk Common Council to the Norwalk City Council, make your voice heard. Darlene.
I don't have any objection. I just think to Greg's question about finance, how much this is going to cost, because does that mean even through this charter, will that have to be, what's that going to cost? What would that look like? And do we have a threshold on that? I mean, if it's 200,000, are we okay with that over a period of time? Does that mean commission charter, it would have to be changed throughout the charter? Just what does that cost look like? And are we okay if it's 100,000 or 50,000 or whatever that threshold might be for the cost? Am I
Nora.
making sense?
Yes.
I'm just wondering if it's possible, if we could ask Ms. Dixon. I mean, I'm visualizing, we have to reprint stationery and business cards for the new council, right, at each new term.
Even with the charter,
Yeah.
like within this charter, our charter itself, how often is it referred to?
So
as common
the
council and all of
charter
that?
is online. All
Okay.
the changes are done online. We
Okay.
don't actually
that's
keep
not
a
hard.
paper copy any
Okay.
longer. And then as far as stationaries are concerned, they're all templates that we do online.
Right.
And if a council member needs a letterhead, we just personalize it and send it to the council person. So I
The only
would
cost I
so
can
it's
actually
Pretty
think of,
insignificant.
the cost
the
will
only
be
cost
very
I can actually
minimal.
think of is the signage
Yeah.
outside the council
Okay.
chambers.
Right.
Exactly.
When
And
we
cha-
did the I Love Norwalk switch, that cost a lot more because it was a logo. But for the council, I think I seem to remember that somebody said, I think it was Attorney Mednick, that It can be stated as city council, also known as a common council. So legal too, but and anyhow, in terms of cost for the switch, it's very, very minimal.
There we go.
Thank you.
And can I just say, and if you change it, it will be changed in your charter because that's what you're going to be approving. Wherever common council shows up, it will now show up city council in the proposed charter.
Nicole.
I don't have a problem with it, but I think it's more of a cultural shift than a financial shift. The name is more culturally, we're shifting to something that is more inclusive, more modern. It's just like when I first got on council, or the council right before me, when we took out the language he and made the language more inclusive of all identities. I think this is the same thing. Going from common council to city council is going to be just a cultural shift. And so, as Irene kind of has educated us, I don't think there should be any substantial costs associated to the name change, because we don't put our name on most things. It's usually the city of Norwalk, and so as long as we're not changing it, the city's name, I think the cost should be minimal.
I would agree with that assessment.
What
Doug.
about the impact on the districts, as well as you pointed out, with the election signage as well?
I'm sorry, are you talking about political signs, or are you talking about?
Yes. And district stationery, as well as city stationery. And as was mentioned, you could also do it as some businesses do as well, by simply saying the DBA, and put all three down, and essentially, as was mentioned, change cost, effectively no cost.
I don't personally, and I don't know what other people think, but a discussion about political campaign costs, I don't really think is germane to this particular discussion, considering this is really a governing charter, like about the governing document of the city. So I don't feel particularly comfortable talking about campaign costs here, but obviously there would be. However, in terms of stationery, it seems like there's a lot of options. And Greg, unless you can think of something different than what Irene and Nicole and others have said, or if there's additional information that you seek, I don't know if you have any other ideas to figure out an answer to your question here.
To Councilman Sutton's point, you can make the change effective after the 2027 election, so it would have no impact in this particular election or for the next term that you would be serving. Because you're going to have council members elected to new terms in November, so they would serve as the final cohort in the common council, and the 2027 election would be the city council election. So everybody starting off their campaigns would be running for the city council. That would be a solution to that issue.
Greg.
Oh, yes. My question was not to create a heavy lift on this item, but one to at least, ensure that we do our due diligence. If we're making a name change, what would the costs be associated with doing that? If it's minimal, fine. And so I'm just asking the question. And if that question rests with the administration to just do a quick assessment and let us know, so that before we vote, we know what that number potentially looks like. That's all I'm looking for. I'm not looking for it to be, a game changer. I think the spirit is to support the change, but in doing our due diligence, we should know if there's any financial impact associated with making the name change.
I agree, and I think it's a good question. Johan.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, to Greg's point, is this something that leadership can check with Corporation Council, and maybe, or is this
Sure.
something
I mean,
that
to be honest, Irene is the person who would know the most about this out of all of us.
Okay. Okay.
But I'm happy to, and Irene can make a note of this, I will make a note of this to sort of run down any sort of formal analysis and figure out if there's anything that we haven't thought of, frankly, in this discussion, and get an estimate, which is all that's been requested here, of any potential financial cost associated with changing the council's name.
So all the expenses of the common council go to my department.
Right.
I'm kind of familiar with what you guys spend. Again, it's very minimal. We don't have paper stationaries. The only expense is right after an election when we print business cards, and also the nameplates, which are very minimal. We might have to change the signage on the common council chambers, which is again very minimal, and maybe signage on the first floor by the elevators. But other than that, I don't really see anything substantial. Again, the code, the charter is now online. So it's very easy to change. As a matter of fact, the ordinance committee always it's a very hardworking committee, and there are always changes, and so we're used to changing the language. Thank you.
Okay. So unless there's anyone who has given an objection, to which I have not heard, and then I think it's pretty fair to say that the council will likely be recommending a change to Article 1 to change the name of the Common Council from the Common Council to the City Council. And I don't know if people had any sort of thoughts about Steve's suggestion about making it effective after the 2027 municipal elections, or not. Or effective after the 2025 municipal election. Nora.
I'd go earlier myself.
I would too, but I just wanted to give people the opportunity.
Josh, I would agree with that too, real quick.
Does anyone have an objection to making that change effective after the 2025 municipal election?
I noticed Jared is here. Maybe he can have some input. He would know best. Thank you.
On the finance piece of this?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I realize we're kind of putting him a little on the spot there, but if Jared has any comment, feel free.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry, I've been having some technical difficulties connecting here, but yes, if you want to make the change, I would say it's fine, kind of pending our doing a little more research. I think as Greg said, just let us think about this for 24 hours if there's anything that we're missing. But I think Irene's right. I don't think there are any major costs, but you know, I'd like to have a little bit of time since this is the first that I've heard about it. So
Okay.
that would be my
I think
suggestion.
that sounds reasonable. Okay. Then I'm going to move on, unless anyone has an objection, back to Article 3. I want to specifically pinpoint 3-3.D1, which is increasing the number of council members to 20 by adding one more district member for each council district, which was included in the draft charter submitted by the Charter Revision Commission. See, Steve, I listened. Does anyone have any objections to this particular proposal? Lisa.
Yeah, no, I don't support it.
Okay.
That's simple.
Dewan, then Johan.
Same. I don't support it.
Johan.
I don't support it.
Doug.
I don't support it.
Okay. Jim and Ann.
I'm a no.
I'm also a no.
All right. Greg.
I would be voting against it.
Okay.
I'm a no.
Okay. Let me ask it this way. Is there anyone who's a yes? I'm sorry, Nicole. I'm sorry.
I didn't know. Did you call my name?
Now I am. Nicole.
Oh, so special. I'm a strong no.
Okay. All right.
So
is there anyone who would be in support of this piece of the draft charter? The silence is deafening. Steve?
For drafting purposes, then, I don't want to call the consensus, that's your job, but it appears there's a consensus here. Then there's a consensus to recommend to the commission that we retain the standard of 15 council members and that we retain the current standard of 2 council members per district.
Correct.
Then that's the way the
I-
resolution. would be
Jalen?
drafted.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right time, but I did want to raise an amendment.
Sure. Actually, you know what? Why, since we're talking about composition of the council, sure, let's do it.
Yeah, so I would be a no to the charter revision committee's recommendation as well. But I think in the spirit of compromise, I would be in favor of adding an additional 2 members to the at-large council seats, bringing the total number to 7, and setting it up where each party will be able to nominate no more than 5 seats. So that will pretty much ensure that there is some minority representation, but also allow for the voters to decide the outcome. The 7 highest vote getters citywide will be elected. And in theory, that could result in a mix of 5 and 2, 4 and 3, or any other type of mix. So from what I heard from my colleagues on the council, a lot of the concerns were they think people should be able to win elections. And I really think that this amendment will really preserve that right to the voters, but also let all of the public comment, which pretty much all of the public comment during this whole process was about minority representation. And I think this is a way to show that we heard them, and then also just bring a diversity of thought. I also would suggest that this takes place at the 2027 municipal election, as well as we have the other things that we might talk about a little bit later that starts in like 2029 or 2030, but I don't really see a reason to hold this up any further. So that'd be my amendment. I did speak to Attorney Mednick about it. I don't know if he has anything to add, but that would be my amendment.
Steve?
The structure that the councilman has proposed is a structure that's pretty common throughout the state of Connecticut. He has articulated most of the elements of it, and it would be relatively easy to draft.
Do council members have any thoughts regarding the amendment proposed by Councilmember Sade?
So really quick, Jalen, do you mean, well, it's basically will still continue to be 15? Okay. It's continue to be 15, but instead of certain in districts, you pushing them to the at-large?
No, that's not
Okay.
correct.
No, so it'd be 17 members, which would still keep like the odd numbers. I mean, yeah, the odd number. And they would just add 2 to the at-large seats.
Yeah, I'm still opposed. I think it's just too many.
Do other council members have thought? Doug?
Let me ask Steve, if I might. The parties other than the 2 major ones, aren't they necessarily splinter groups from one of the 2 parties anyway? And when election time comes around, they tend to cross endorse more than other parties with the party that they're splintered from.
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know how that works in Norwalk. I know that in other communities, you can effectuate something like that. What this is designed to do, it's really, when they talk about minority party representation, it really should be described as a cap on the majority party representation. And who gets elected after that, so that under Jalen's proposal, if you can nominate no more than 5, then the maximum number any party could have is 5. But if somebody from a minority party ends up in position number 3 or 4, they're elected. And it's only when you reach the cap of a party, that the remaining seats would go to the other party. I have seen situations where in Waterbury, for example, at the early part of the century, there was a party called the Independent Party, and there were a number of dissident Democrats who were in that party who were still enrolled Democrats. So in state and federal elections, they participated in the democratic process, but they ran as independents. And so you had a situation where the cap on the majority was a cap on those who ran as Democrats, but you still had people who were enrolled Democrats who were elected as independents. New Britain also has a situation with the fusion ticket that the mayor of New Britain, the current mayor of New Britain, fashioned, where she had unaffiliated Democrats and Republicans running, but they ran as Republicans in that case. And so they got counted toward the Republican vote, even though some of them were, quote, enrolled Democrats and unaffiliated. And then the Democrats would be the minority party in that circumstance, even though they might have a numerical majority in terms of enrolled Democrats on the council. It really is a function of how you are elected, what party you're elected by. So there's potential for abuse, but there's potential for abuse in all elections. But I hope I answered your question, Doug.
Can I speak, Josh, because my hand's
Yes, I'm sorry. I was saying yes, and I was saying Lisa, and I was muted.
So that's, I think, what one of my concerns is because we do have an independent party that plays both sides of the fence, and it's really unclear. I'm just a little bit reluctant. I just think it's going to create some game playing. So that's what my reluctance is on this, Jalen. I'm a little concerned about that. And I do think as the body gets bigger and bigger, it gets a little tricky. So I'm not sure that we're really going to accomplish what we want to accomplish with that. With all due respect to Heather, she was voted in by the Republicans, but she calls herself an independent. So we already have an example of this in our current council.
Johan.
Thanks, Josh. I guess I'll just briefly reiterate what I've expressed in one of our last meetings. And the way this reads is that it's an attempt to essentially engineer a guaranteed outcome by bypassing the electoral process. And to me, it sounds like institutional entitlement. And we all have the same path to the ballot box, although the path for some may be difficult, but there's a difference between having a greater inclusive democratic process and just engineering an outcome, right? And I know there's these groups that keep perpetuating this notion to normalize the idea that it's okay to bypass the electoral process in Norwalk because it might be done in other cities or towns, but I'm completely against that. And the idea of using this misleading definition of diversity in thought is incorrect, because that assumes that political affiliation completely dictates how I think, right? And I may disagree many times with someone from the same political affiliation. I may agree with someone from the opposing party, but diversity in thought comes from levels of education, levels of professional experiences, upbringing, values, principles, etc. So I'm a strong no for this.
Jalen.
Yeah, so my thought on that is that it really just opens it up, where I think we're thinking about it, and I think a lot of the people who've spoken to public comment is thinking about it because of the way that it's been for like the last 10 years. But like political processes swing, and this just allows that you're gonna have a difference of thought and difference of political party that's at the table. Currently, for the past 10 years or so, the Democrats have full control. But if we look back to like the 2013 election, if we had this same thing in play, then the Democrats will have just like seats at the table. And I think this just allows it, but I think it's just a spirit of compromise. The voters, in my opinion, still have an idea of who. We have 3 parties that we could talk about in Norwalk, and they have a choice to say, like, everybody. It's not like somebody's only going to nominate 2, there will be losers in the election, and it's still a process that people have to follow. But I do think it does allow it, and it's not something that just the political leaders. If you talk to people, like, people do seem like, since there is a supermajority now, that their voices aren't being heard. And I think that it's important to listen to not just the political leaders that might come to the meetings, but if you talk to people on the street, they are kind of upset, just because they feel like their thoughts aren't being heard and there's nobody's listening or speaking for them. And again, that's nothing on us or no judgment on the council. It's just what people are saying. And I just think that this allows for diversity, and it's 2 seats. It doesn't change the game. If it, like, say if this stays how it is now, it doesn't change the game much. But it just allows to have a voice at the table for these people. And I think that that's important.
Nora, Jim, Dewan.
So I will speak in a second for myself, but I promised Heather Dunn, she's on vacation and can't be here. But I heard from her at great length on this today. So I promised that I would at least say that she has thoughts on this. And in particular, she wants to put forward the idea that the way that she thinks it should best be addressed is through the elimination of at-large and a moving to each district being 3 people with a cap at 2 from any given party within that 3. So I promised her that I would raise that fact, that was her suggestion on this. Speaking for myself, I really appreciate, Jalen, your giving real time and thought to this and trying to think about compromise positions. And I've appreciated throughout this process your real attunement to feedback that we're getting from people in terms of feeling like the structure of the city is not working for them, is not making them feel like they have a voice, is not making them feel represented. And obviously that's something I've been thinking a lot about on the budget process side. I'm still wrestling with whether this way of going about it is a way that I feel comfortable with. I share a lot of Johan's sort of philosophical concerns about it. I am concerned about, in general, about making sure that the voter voice kind of controls. And so, but I hear the thoughtful way in which you have tried to craft this to make sure that there is still a lot of voter voice in it. So I want to continue thinking about it. I guess I also just, my other reaction to it is that 15, I think, is about the maximum for sort of functionality. It gets unwieldy already at 15. And one of the, so there's questions there, but I really thought about this today, thinking that I appreciated the nuance you're bringing to this, and I do want to continue to think about it.
Jim and Dewan.
Yeah, I second what Joanne had to say about it. I'm just, I look back at all of us went through the same process, and I think in big democratic majority cities, there's always, the opportunity that you're going along on the coattails of some of the stronger candidates. But in reality, that there's no reason, the way we're set up in different districts, why the other parties don't have an equal opportunity to put up a candidate that could go against any one of us. I just don't like the idea of kind of jury rigging the process instead of just a straight vote through whether it's your unaffiliated or through a party or whatever it is. That's why I'm against it. I just think it gets too complicated for a lot of voters out there. And Jared, Jalen, I think I really commend you for thinking this through, and I think it's a kind of a really unique idea. But again, I just can't support it.
Dewan.
Hey, yeah. So I mean, I once again I get it too. I do think representation is important from all, you know, parties or whatever the case may be. But I think the problem here is, like a few of my colleagues said, it gets a little muddy to me when you have more than 15. And also within our, when you talk to people in our communities, they people in the majority of party, Democrats, have issues with things and it still don't get addressed. So I don't think, you know, having other people from different parties is going to change the fact that individuals in our community has issues that's not being met despite the party. And I think that's one of the biggest things. And to Johan's point, you know, we we don't all think alike, even within our party. Um, and once again, I don't think that's going to change either. So yeah, I'm still against it.
Jalen.
So one of the things, if this was to happen, just a one concern about being more than 15, we don't have to, and Attorney Mednick could fix me if I'm wrong, but or correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have to add the 2. We can stay to the 15 and then do it where it's 3. The reason I did it that way is so that people didn't feel like they were gonna have to give up their seats. And especially since we have to present it to the council. So that's something that can be done. But then that would just mean that, like right now, we have 5 at-large council members that are Democrat, and I just thought it'd be an easier pill to swallow, just adding 2 rather than taking 2 from the 5 that we currently have, because I felt like people might feel like they will have to give up their seats. So that was just my thinking about it, just so that it's an easier pill to swallow for the council. And that's something that me and Attorney Mednick has spoke about as well. So if that's just because the numbers get muddy, then I think there. But I also think that even if it might be the same few people that keep showing up to public comment, I think that this is something that has been brought up, and I just wanted to us to be able to talk about it, and also be able to give a package to the city or something that they could vote for.
Dewan, then Nicole.
Last point. I think what Heather said or suggested was really the best way to go about it. If we make, because I don't see the real purpose behind at-large seats. You know, they have the same authority that in district seats have. So I don't understand the real point behind it outside of just having to work a little harder during election time. But what Heather suggested was really a great idea. I'll be in support of that. But you know, adding more, I can't support, and taking away seats. I don't think that's something I'll support either.
Nicole.
I feel several different ways about this. First of all, Jalen, thank you for offering up something. Because something has to be done. I hear a lot of language and I hear a lot of people saying what's right, what's fair about voice. People want to have a seat at the table. I hear a lot of that language. But I caution you, everybody here, that you're not making language, you're setting precedent. If this is enacted, this is now law. It's not language, it's reality. And the fact that I think Jalen or somebody said something about the political pendulum and how it swings. And it is going to swing back the other way because history does repeat itself. And a lot of times when we see ebbs and flows, it's because of what the individual citizen is going through, and they voice their discomfort or their dislike at the ballot box. So then you will see ebbs and flows. But the proposal of adding council people, I think is just, I watched when it came through or discussion was had with the charter revision. And I listened to those individuals that raised the concern and then the public members who spoke to that concern. I would say publicly, and I'll say here, majority of those people were self-serving. They weren't speaking about the larger good of the community. They were speaking about their larger good. And even though we are Democrats, we are all not, we all don't have the same voice here, and we're not all give the same privileges here, but that's a conversation for another day. I think something has to happen, but I don't think adding chairs to a table that's already, we can't fit at the table we got. So I think something structurally needs to happen, but I also think, Jalen, that the pendulum is going to swing, and it's going to swing to the other way because citizens, as you have said, are very unhappy with what is going on. And I see your heart and I understand your heart. And I know that you are just trying to give those people something to say, hey, we hear you. And so I appreciate you for that work that you have done. But I think that this is self-serving. And if it came from the other side, it's self-serving. Someone always wants to be in power. When the Republicans were in power, we were scratching to get in power. And when I say we, I mean the Democratic Party. Now we are here, they're scratching to get in power. And I think it's just, I get nervous about this because it's setting precedent. And this has worked in our charter for how many years? This system? I'm not saying I'm totally against it, Jalen. It's just the self-serving part, and not necessarily from you, but from other people that are bringing it up is really, is what's putting a bad taste in my mouth.
Dewan.
That was old. I'm sorry.
So you don't have a comment?
No, I just left my hand up
Oh,
by
okay.
accident.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other thoughts? Doug?
Yeah, I think in part, Heather's notion can be solved by if we make sure that the at-large people do what the at-large people are intended to do. I think the more common thought nowadays is that you can get anyone from any district to fill an at-large position. And my recollection is that that's not the original concern. The idea was to try to get somebody who was very knowledgeable of the entire city to present what they interpret as a true vision for the city in their district as it relates to their district. And so if you get people in District D, for example, to run at large rather than a person from some other district to run at large, I think we get the representation that we ought to have. Close comment.
I will say before, I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts, and then I kind of wanted to share a couple of cents of my own. Okay. Here's the dilemma that I'm having, which is on the one hand, I think that political diversity is good. Diversity of thought is good. I having heard Heather's proposal just a few minutes ago, I reflexively don't agree with it. With the only reason being that I do think that and I think Doug was kind of speaking to this, that the reason to have an set of at-large members, and like I'm super biased because I am one, but also that it gives us a more holistic, that as a district council member, you are elected to represent a distinct group of people. Obviously, there are district council members who we weigh on issues that are outside your district. Like that's part of the job. But I have always felt a different perspective being an at-large member. And I don't think that perspective is something that I would be willing to get away with or get rid of in exchange for increasing district representation. I know that's my view on that. In terms of, it's funny, I always think when they call it minority party representation, I always think it's really actually about political diversity. And there's some merit to that. On the other hand, the thing that I struggle with on this is that there is also political winds do shift. And it's not about who's clawing on power now versus who's having power later. It's more about that the power ultimately rests in the voters. It's not that, at this point, yes, it's been basically a decade where the Republicans have not been able to establish, even something even close to a majority. And I'm not sure it's just because their name has an R next to it, or it's because they haven't built a profile that has garnered a majority of the voting public. And like that's not a knock on Republicans, it's just like what the election results are. But I'm not a no on this yet. I'm willing to hear more because I do also think that one of the biggest things that we get, Democrats get accused of, or frankly, any group that's largely concentrated in the same political party that's been in power for a while, gets accused of groupthink and an unwillingness to hear another perspective and an unwillingness to hear, some conflict and some thought. And to be honest, and I realize she's not here, but I like it when Heather brings a different perspective from a different place. And I think that actually makes us better. It makes me want to hone my arguments more. And I think, at the end of the day, it really shouldn't be about political party. It should be about service. But we do have political parties with different beliefs, and I'm not sure it's necessarily a bad thing to hear a little bit from people who think a little differently than us. I think that's probably a good thing. So I don't know. I'm not 100% anywhere, but that's kind of where I am at this moment. Jalen.
Yeah, so just for some history on it, this is actually like a state law, and
Yeah, for boards and
that
commissions. Yes.
for minority representation. I mean, the only reason, and Attorney Meddy, maybe you could expand. The only reason that Norwalk doesn't have to have that on the council is because we have the districts. If we didn't have the districts, we would have minority representation like that's mandated by the state.
True.
So that's why it's done in other cities, because it's something that's actually mandated by the state and statute 9-167A. So it's not something that I know it's new to Norwalk, but I think it's something that is done around the state, unless there's loopholes like you have districts around it. So I think that's why it's not something that's too outlandish. But I do think that it's important to show compromise, because unlike every other vote that we make on the council, this is something that's going to the voters in Norwalk. And we spent a lot of time and a lot of effort on this charter and money on this charter revision. And I think it's important that we deliver a package that's of substance to the voters, and something that we can be confident that's going to pass. Yes, we're going to have to do votes and do work to make sure that that we get it, but we do have to make sure that we're going to have buy-in by our constituents, because they're the ones that's going to make the final decision. Our vote next week isn't going to be the final vote. And just because we say it's going to happen doesn't mean it's going to happen. The people have to vote it in. And with that, we need buy-in from stakeholders, because if not, we just wasted a lot of time and money on this, because we presented something that's not going to be appealing to the voters. So I do think that this compromise is important, but I think looking at the history of it and across the state, which like it's not something that's too groundbreaking. And I just think that we should just really just think about that, because we got to present this to the city of Norwalk for them to approve the whole charter revision. No matter how much we split the questions, people are going to vote yes or no on this. And I think we just have to present something to them that they're going to be able to that's going to be appealing to them.
Steve?
Can I just say, I don't want to insult Jalen, but Attorney Syed said it well. He really did summarize the statute very, very well. And if you take a look around the state, and this is not an advocacy position, but it is pretty standard procedure. If you live in most of the communities north of you, which have selectmen form of government, they all have minority party representation provisions because they're all at large, the 3-member, 5-member Board of Selectmen bodies. In a straight election cycle, if you use the argument, in most of those communities, there'd be no Democrats, there'd be all Republicans in a vast majority of the communities throughout the state. So the theory behind the statute was to make sure that people are not cut out, and Jalen's absolutely correct, that the reason you have an option is because you do have districts. And the state, the assumption of that is that the districts would capture and reflect the demographics of a community more so than an at-large situation. So I think he explained it very, very well.
Nikki.
Thank you, Jalen. I have a question, and clearly we've been talking to 2 different people, so I'm very interested in your perspective. Those persons that have reached out to me about this particular topic, it has been a different perspective, but I know, or I hear you saying, or my understanding is that you're trying to get something to ignite the base or to ignite voters to wanting to vote on this. You know, turnout is always something that's a political kind of thing, but is this one question enough? And I'm asking your personal opinion. Do you think this one question is enough to get people out to vote on this? I think most people are neutral when it comes to this, or they're not, or they don't know enough to go either way. Am I making sense?
So my thinking is, it's not just this one thing. There's one amendment that brings it up. I think that it's about packaging charter revision as a package to the people that sends a message. And I think this, along with amendments that Councilperson Nijinsky Eichner had made, as well as the 4-year terms, I think it sends a message that we want to govern the city the right way. We want to fix some things on the budget, in my opinion, not speaking for the whole council, but we want to give the council some more authority and foresight so that it could be more transparent, and that we listen to people that come to us with ideas that may be different from ours, and we invite people to the table. And I think that that's a message that we can give to the city, the people in Norwalk, and I think it's clear. And I think that by our actions on this and compromising on different things, I think that it sends a message to the voters that we listen to them and we want to serve the city better and do better, but also do right when we're doing it. So I think that it's a package, not just this amendment. And I don't think that this amendment is going to be the amendment that saves everything. But I think that as a package with the work of the council and charter revision, I think that we can put together a package that people could truly buy in. And I think we could send the right message with that. And I think that this just kind of adds to that, in my opinion.
Okay. Obviously, there is not a consensus either which way. There's more discussion to be had.
You want me to leave it on the recommendation list for debate purposes?
Yes,
And
because I
okay.
imagine there will be a vote on this one.
All right.
So, you know, the beat goes on.
Thank you.
And speaking of going on, let's finish out. Obviously, we're not talking about the 4-year term, but unless anyone has any objections to, there's one other provision I don't think we've talked about, which is that 3-4.A1 about formalizing the practice of documenting the reapportionment of council districts. I haven't heard anything on this in months, so I'm assuming that no one has any. Unless anyone has an objection, raise it now. Okay. Let's move on to Article 4 then, with the understanding that we will come back to the 4-year term question later on. Actually, wait a minute. Where's Darlene?
She dropped out a moment ago.
Is she coming back, or did she need to step off?
No, I believe sorry, I don't think she stepped off because of the mayoral term. I think she will be back.
Okay. because I was debating whether if people wanted to discuss the 4-year term, if they should do it now because Darlene is not here, or if anyone knows if she's planning to come back in like a second.
I don't know when she's planning on coming back. I can text her if you want to do it now since she's not
All right.
here. I
Why
do
don't
think
we-
Mr.
since we're
Burnett is
in-
also gone at the
Oh.
moment. There's
Yeah.
a,
Yeah. You know what? I know it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Why don't we do this? I know that we've had discussions. Why don't we bring it up, and if we need to stop it and resume it, why don't we, if there are any people who wish to discuss 3-4.A1 regarding suggestion of 4-year terms for mayor and town clerk following the 2029 election and for the common council following the 2031 election. Are there people who would like to speak about this item? Okay, let me phrase it differently. Is there anyone who has an objection to the draft charter that in the draft charter says that it will be setting 4-year terms for the mayor and town clerk following the 2029 election and for the common council following the 2031 election?
Josh,
Yes.
I'm very much so undecided about
Okay.
terms. So
Okay. Are there any others who are undecided? I see Nicole Eady. This isn't a judgment. This part of the purpose of tonight's meeting is to see upon what items there is a consensus, what items may require further debate or a vote. I have a feeling this is going to be one of those items. So, Steve, add it to that list.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, that was a lot shorter than I thought it was going to be. Anne.
I'm not objecting to this, but I did want to find out if this is the part of the process where we talk about breaking questions out on the referendum ballot. Is that
So just a
because I know that
reminder-
there's been public feedback that this is an item that the public would like to have broken out as a separate question.
Yeah, and I think there's nothing wrong about discussing that. I would note, and Steve's kind of said this at the top, and just a reminder, we are making our recommendations to the Charter Revision Commission. Then there's going to be a conferral. Then the version that comes back to us, we go straight up or down on. Then after that, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, then we decide the formatting, the number of, the language, and any sort of formatting concerns of the ballot questions. Is that an accurate
More than that.
description?
Yeah, more than that, you'll be either approving or disapproving the charter. Once you approve or disapprove, once you approve the charter, you'll be doing all the things that Josh just said. You'll be
Right.
Laying out the ballot questions.
So, and the answer to that is, it's an absolute discussion we should have. It's not necessarily the thing we don't need to decide anything tonight on that particular question. Let me put it that way. Or rather, we don't need to decide anything on the 22nd on that particular question because there are no votes tonight. So, Nora.
I was just gonna say though, that I think what Anne is asking is, do people object to the idea of this being a separate question? Because that may
Oh, okay.
impact her willingness to vote or not vote for the,
And is that a fair interpretation of what, then I apologize for misunderstanding.
I had both questions actually.
Okay. All right.
The process
Does anyone-
question.
Okay, so we've now done the process question, but let's now move on to the question that Nora/Ann raised. Is that,
Can I just say one thing? The commission has had a discussion about this and assumed, and then it's ultimately up to you, assumed that there would be a separate question on an issue of this nature, but
Yeah.
just want to let you know their thinking.
Ann, your hand's still up. I don't know if you
Oh,
had
sorry.
additional.
No, I'm good.
I would support it being a separate question. I don't know if there are any people who feel that it would be better to do it as one whole question. That's not something I would support. I think there should be more than one question. But Nicole.
I think just for the sanctity of the people who have to vote, it needs to be a separate question.
Yeah.
Because again, there is conversation being had in the community. I don't know how many of us are a part of those conversations, but there are conversations being had, and people feel very strongly about the 4-year term. Not so much about everything else on the charter, but very strongly about this. And so I think it needs to be separated, because I feel that if we keep it together, they're not going to pass any part of the charter. That's only my personal position.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wants to make a point on this particular discussion item? Okay, then I think we can, there's nothing we need to add to the resolution at this point now, but I think there's an understanding that we will likely end up breaking up the ballot questions, and assuming 4-year term is a part of the draft charter, that would end up being a separate, almost being a separate question on the ballot. No, Nikki, I see your hands up again.
I'm so sorry. My brain is going faster than
No,
my
you're all good.
when we're talking about the 4, did I miss it? Was there any language in regards to term limit of the 4-year term?
Term, like how many times the mayor, how many terms the mayor could have?
Yes.
I don't believe so. I don't think there's anything in the draft charter that puts
Because I
a
heard a
number of
discussion,
terms.
but I didn't think I read anything about it.
I
So
didn't,
as
And
it
the reason
comes,
for that,
yes,
I'm
Attorney
sorry.
Minnick.
And the reason for that, term limits are not permitted in the state of Connecticut. So even if we wanted to, we couldn't do it.
Okay.
so we're prohibited by state law.
Well, not by state law, but by common law. There's no express grant of authority to do it. It's like the recall case that I argued at the Supreme Court in the 1980s when I was a little boy, and that eliminated recall in the state of Connecticut. It's a similar concept, that there's no express grant of authority to limit terms.
Thank you for the clarity.
Okay, thanks for the question.
Nora.
And one thing that I had said in relation to that is that I do think we have a cultural norm in this country around 2 4-year terms. And that is potentially an argument for it, is that I think there is some cultural belief that that is an acceptable length of time. And even if it may resonate more as 2 4-year terms for people feeling held to that, as opposed to the 2-year terms, which I think people don't necessarily get the same concept of a common limit from. My only hope in that.
Yeah, and I would also note that, I mean, for elected officials like members of Congress who serve 2-year terms, many of whom serve dozens of them. You know, I mean, how many members of Congress have served 30 years and got elected 15 times? You know, that's a culture too. But it's not really a rebuttal. It's just there's something that popped into my mind. Okay. Well, then let's move on to Article 4. Are there any items in Article 4 that people would like to raise or discuss? And I'm sorry, when I say Article 4, I'm first starting with anything in the draft charter from the Charter Revision Commission. And I don't believe, oh, wait, nope, there is. Hold on. All right, so first, let's just start with any discussion about, well, any sort of language recommended by the Charter Commission in Article 4, or you know what I'm saying. I don't need to do the whole rundown here. Okay, seeing none. Nora?
Sure. So I have 2 amendments that I have put forward. One amendment that many people have put forward, and I merely proposed some language for. I don't necessarily take credit for, and then one that I had specifically put forward. So let's start with the first one, which a number of people have raised, and this is 47C. So this is the compensation of council members, and there are many ways we could address this. I put forward one example or one possible language approach, which was to tie the council member's salary to a percentage of the mayor's salary. And this would allow it to increase a little bit every year, as opposed to the situation we're currently in, where it got stuck in 1951 and has never changed since then. And that could be done at any number of percentages. 3% would give us approximately 5,000, and then it goes up from there. So I think that the question for this body is really sort of, what is the right level of compensation? We heard from folks across the state on this. Attorney Bednick, when he organized the forums we had speaking to leaders from other places, there are, I think Hartford is at 9,000, or Hartford is at maybe at 15,000. 15. Hartford is at 15, I think. So there's a range across the state. No one who gets paid as little as we do.
No
And
one
so,
touches Stanford gets 0.
right, I'm sorry, as I'm saying, no one who gets paid as little as we do.
Who gets paid? I'm sorry. Okay.
Right. So so there are, and I think the bodies that don't get paid at all tend to be larger than ours. I mean, Stanford is 35 people, 40 people. So, and I think from a standpoint of recruiting people, of a standpoint of making sure that this council resembles the city in terms of the people who serve on it, making sure that people's time, it is a significant sacrifice of time, and asking people to do that. The more, younger folks with other responsibilities, folks with children, it's harder to get them to serve, in part because of the cost of doing so. And so there is an argument that, significant and meaningful compensation really would help us recruit more people who more accurately reflect the sort of range of residents. I also think, and this is a conversation I had with someone thoughtful today, the legislative body, I mean, one of the things that I'm struggling with in this whole charter, and in the city at large, right, is this, and in the nation right now, I think we're struggling with a lot. What is the legislative function? How do we respect the importance of the legislative role? And, to the extent that it is uncompensated, and that people translate that lack of compensation to mean that it is insignificant or doesn't matter, or is of less value than the work being done by the mayor, by other people who are paid. So these are, I think, all good reasons for considering a genuine and meaningful compensation for the members of this body. That said, I just also am very well aware of issues raised by other members of this body about, the cost to the city, particularly in a moment when we are potentially facing significant fiscal challenges coming down the pike. And so I put forward kind of this language as an option for people to discuss. And I think if we want to do it, what level we want to set it at, that's a whole range of flexibility there. That I think it really would matter quite a bit what people's perspectives were to get the right place for that.
Does anyone have any discussion, thoughts, questions on the amendment raised by Nora regarding council compensation? Nicole?
I just want to say I'm okay with the amendment. Thank you.
Jalen?
Yeah, my only like concern with it, and not really opposition, was the tone of like sending this to the public and seeming tone deaf. Also, I do agree that we need to make the council more inclusive and more equitable, especially like with the cost of living going up and everything. And my concern with like the 3% is that it really, to me, it doesn't move the needle as much as it should. Because, and I think sometimes like people who are kind of underserved or anything, we tell them that we're moving the needle to make it more equitable, but we're not making far enough strides for that. So that was my only concern with that. I'm not against it, but I do see how some voters might seem like it's tone deaf. But again, I'm not against it. But I just think that's something that we should think about.
Jim?
Yeah, I pick up on what Jalen's saying. I think that this is just not the time for us to start voting ourselves a pay raise. I think it doesn't send a really good message, I don't think. And I understand it doesn't take place right away. It's down the road a little bit, but still, it's not the right right message for us to be sending that. And you know, and it would, you know, if you hear of a teacher being fired or struggling to keep teachers in school, then you've got the fat cat city council people that are getting themselves an increase. So I just think it's not a bad idea. Maybe it's down the road a little bit, but not now.
Johan.
I was going to say I agree with Jim entirely. So that's all.
Are there others who wish to speak about this? Nicole.
I really didn't want to speak about this at all, but I guess I have to. It's hard to sit. And though, Jim, I have to say I respect your position and I understand your position. But it's hard to sit here and understand that people are literally not being able to serve because we have created this boundary and we have created this table of privilege. And that's what it is. You have to be of a certain economic pedigree or a certain economic standing to be able to serve. If that's not fair and one of the most undemocratic things I've ever heard, I don't know what it is. We all feel, I think we can agree that we feel bad about what happened at the on the school side, but none of that is anybody's fault at this table. That's beyond our scope. I'll put it in that means. That is beyond our scope. But to physically say this is not the time to do that, then when is the time? We're always going to have some sort of budget restraint. Budget restraints don't necessarily disappear. There is not a rainbow and we have a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's hard to hear. It's really hard to hear when we can sit proudly and say, no. And again, not fighting for me. I'm fighting for the people who are coming behind me and who need not their worth and their value, but who need some type of compensation to cover minimum costs to free up their time to come to these tables. You have to at least be allowed to cover childcare. So we're not going to cover childcare. So anybody that has a small child that might need childcare, we're saying we don't value you. You don't need to be at this table because we can't even cover your childcare. It doesn't sit well with me. It's hurtful to hear. Again, I respect your position. You don't have to agree with me, but I know there is a populace of people who would love to serve, but because of a challenge that we have created, we now remove these people from the table. And I just think it's unfair.
Jalen, then Jim.
I know Councilwoman Najolski Agnes here did the math. You break down like how much it'd be like per resident. 'Cause I think that's important. Like kind of talk about what we're talking about dollars and cents.
Sure. So I think it would work out. I have to look at again at the exact math, but I think it would work out to $2. $2 per resident is the mayor's salary. So if we're at 3% of that, it would work out to, I don't know, a tiny fraction of that amount. So do the math on that. It works out to about 70 cents per resident. Sorry, my echo. I don't know why that's bad. So it's it would be, I mean, the other way to think about it is the 3% of the mayor's salary, that's about $75,000 a year. So, I mean, that is, quite small in relation to many other items we approve.
Yeah, and my point of bringing that up is, for me, it's not, it's the time, it's just, I think it's always going to be a hard pill to swallow once the council is making this recommendation to the people. So that's only my holdup. And again, not against it, but I do think that again, it's about messaging. And once you break it down to how much it actually going to cost residents, I think that's something I could talk about. So again, my objection, I just think it was good for us to just talk about how much it's actually going to cost.
Does anyone else have any questions, thoughts, concerns? Anne?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Councilperson Ayers and say I 100% agree. It's an equity issue. It's a privilege access. And I think that compensation partially addresses that, but I also think that personally, I would like to hear more from the public on what their view is of public service, community service, what it means to different parts of the public. Does the public value having public servants that are, that are giving their time now if we're looking at also a 4-year term, that's a lot of time. So I'm not one way or the other on this issue, but I just wanted to respect particularly those that are bringing this up as an equity issue, and I see that.
Greg?
Yes, comment and then a question. The comment is related to, I mean, the amount, those of us that actually sit on the council, we know the value of our time and going to meetings, going to events, researching items, being prepared to vote. All of that are billable hours. And even what we are proposing doesn't come close to scratching the surface of the amount of time that we put in. If we truly did the math in terms of our valuable time, billable hours of being prepared for meetings and etc., we would be asking for much, much, much more, and we're not. So the question then begs, what is the value of even asking for this small increase? Because it still doesn't solve the problem. I don't see how it creates an equitable situation, because the small increase that's being requested still doesn't, in my opinion, open the aperture for more candidates that might need economic assistance to sit on the council. It really does not move the needle at all. So, and so when is the right time to ask for an increase? That I don't know the answer to that, but I don't know when the right time would be. There needs to be a time, but I don't know when the right time is. My question to the chair, to Mr. Megnet, is, and I believe I raised this before, is this an item that can be potentially split out so that it stands alone? So the voters can say yes or no to this one item and not have this influence other items that they have to vote on? Maybe that might help us get a sense of voter thinking as it relates to increased compensation to the council by just having it on the ballot.
Yes, the answer is yes, you can separate it out. In fact, I mean, the way I've done this in other communities is where we agree on a baseline. And I think that Nora has created the 3% standard, which is roughly $4,950. Am I correct, Nora, on that?
I thought it worked out to more like 5,300, but
Oh,
Um,
what's the mayor's, I was looking at the mayor's salary, it looked like 165,000. Is it higher than that now?
I think this year it went up slightly. I'd have to pull my
All right.
book, my budget book again, but I want to say it was like
Well, whatever
100
it is. So we're looking at that figure. So let's say that's a base, let's say 5,000 is the baseline, just for argument's sake. What I have done, because under Connecticut law, you are required to send legislative compensation only, not the mayor's compensation, not the town clerk's compensation, not the registrars of voters compensation, the mayor's, the council's compensation, the legislative body's compensation has to be approved by referendum. And what I've done with charter revisions is we have a standard where this provision is adopted, either as a standalone question or as a question within the overall referendum for the charter. And therefore, it meets the standard of having been approved. And then to avoid the situation that Nora talked about earlier, where you're dealing with a standard of compensation was approved in, I forgot the year she said, 1953 or maybe 1913. I don't remember exactly when the compensation at $600 a year went into effect. You get a cost of living increase. And if you want to go beyond that, then you would have to go for a referendum. But because it's approved by referendum and the cost of living increase is tied to the referendum, I think you can avoid referenda in the future, and the salary would go up automatically as permitted by the state constitution. There's two other limitations, which I won't get into right now. So the answer to your question, Greg, is that yes, you can separate it. And two, it's logical in the sense that it is subject to referendum approval anyhow. And this would just clarify that.
Nicole.
To try to answer in a poor way, something that Greg said. It's not that this is going to get us where we need to go, but it's a start. In a couple of weeks, or maybe in the next time we meet, I don't remember, we will have to approve, I think, the next 3 years of all those employees in the city hall, including the mayor's salary and their salary increase. We have seen that in documentation. In that documentation, and I think it was for the next 3 years, if I'm remembering correctly, you can see a very small increase. As they increase, I think, if I'm understanding this correctly, the compensation for the council would increase because it's comparable to the mayor, and the mayor's salary is increasing. Our current mayor that is currently sitting in the seat, his current salary has increased from when he started. And so, again, we're not going to get to full worth in the next 5 years or overnight, but it would slowly get us there. And so that's why I think we're kind of making the first step in the right direction. You also asked, is there, I think you said, when is a good time? My personal opinion, there will never be a good time. Because as the legislative body of the city, we make choices. And a lot of times the choices that we make are based on the financial strength or the financial vitality of the city. So there, me personally, again, I don't think there would ever be a perfect time. But I think it's cowardly to not try something. It's cowardly to say, "Oh, we're only going to do it when it's sunny outside and when everything is perfectly." We have to keep moving with a perspective, and maybe it's because I went to the Civil Rights Museum this week, with the perspective that one day we are going to get where we need to go. And it's not going to happen overnight, but it will gradually happen. And so that's why I think, if not now, when?
Waiting to see if anyone else had any other questions, comments. Okay, then suffice it to say, there is not a consensus on this item. I think we can put this on the items of things that we'll need to vote on next week.
So is this on the list for discussion, obviously, or
Yes,
not? Okay. And for framing it, are we framing it as 3% of the mayor's salary?
Nora,
Again, I think that's really up to other folks, in terms of what amount is the right amount.
well, let's start with the proposal.
The proposal is as a percentage of the mayor's salary, such that it will therefore increase automatically. So I had put it at 3% because 5,000 was a number that had been discussed. It is certainly, if, and to the points that I think Mr. Burnett is making, if that amount really is still inadequate to the amount of time involved, and if the goal is to increase equity, if a larger amount means that it would it better serve its goal of having more people able to participate if the amount is actually higher than that? I'm open to that conversation. I have no
Can I help frame things for everybody? Because I'm not going to be able to participate in the debate when it's before the body, unless I can. I don't know if I can, but just to give you, Nora gave you a little bit of sample, but happen to have the chart right in front of me, so everybody gets a sense of what other communities are doing. Mr. Majority Leader, can I just lay it out very quickly?
Yeah,
It'll give everybody a context. Bridgeport, 9,000, but it's not compensation, it's a stipend for constituent services, for newsletters, laptop, mobile phones, meals, etc. I imagine daycare, childcare would be included in that. Stanford, no compensation. New Haven, the president makes 6,500, the members 5,000. Hartford, 9-member body, $15,000 plus expenses. Waterbury, 15 members, the president 6,000, party leaders 5,000, and members 4,000. Norwalk, Danbury, no compensation. New Britain, 15-member body, 5,000. Bristol, 6-member body, 10,166. I'm just looking at my footnote here. It's established through the budget process. It says nothing. Meriden, it ranges from 2,400 to 7,400. I'm not sure how that is, but that's a city manager form of government. Camden, similar to you, 15-member body, 2,250, 2,560 for the leadership, so it's 25, just under 2,600, and the members get 2,160. Manchester, again, council manager, the members get 2,000, deputy mayor gets 2,400. West Haven, $2,400 and change. East Hartford, 4,000 for the chair, 4,000 for the vice chair, 4,000 for the majority leaders. I guess everybody gets 4,000 in there. And Middletown, little Middletown, smallest of the big cities, at 47,000, gets 9,000 a year. So that's the range of salaries. Some of those have provisions with cost of living, but as Nora indicated, if it's a percentage, they'd be entitled to an increase whenever the mayor gets an increase. There's as I said, another constitutional limitation on when the mayor cannot get an increase every year. There's a cap on when the mayor can get there's a time frame for when he gets the increase. So that's my aside, Mr. Majority Leader. Sorry.
thank you, Steve. Greg.
Thank you for those numbers, Mr. Mednick. Clearly Norwalk is leading the pack, being at the bottom of the list. Just curious, how do we address the scenario that could potentially happen where we could elect a mayor who, for whatever reason, feels that they don't need compensation, and similar to, I believe, Mayor Bloomberg, when he served in New York, he took a annual compensation of $1. Does that mean the percentage of the council's stipend would be a percentage of $1?
Is that
I'm
a
just
That was
throwing,
great. That was
I'm
great.
just throwing this out there
That's a good.
as
I
we're going through
genuinely
the
appreciate
discussion
this.
and thinking about these things. We could, there's nothing
Yeah, what
saying
if
we
we have
don't
a
have.
billionaire bear?
We might have a mayor who's financially comfortable and say, as my contribution to the city of Norwalk, I'm not going to accept a salary. And if that's the scenario in this charter revision, the percentage of the mayor's salary, if it's zero, that means the council's zero. I'm just posing it as a question.
All right. Well, this is fun. Nora.
Honestly, no, it's a great question. It's actually something that I thought about. And I did write the language as allocated to the mayor as opposed to allocated to the mayor in the budget as opposed to actually paid to the mayor, because I believe, and I could be wrong about this, but I believe that even in situations like, I think Bloomberg donated his money back to the city as opposed to it not having been a salary. But it is a fair question and one that I certainly defer to Mr. Mednick on, whether there's better language to prohibit, to make sure that in a situation like that, that did not occur. But it is, because it's a good question. These are the kind of things in drafting. This is why I like having someone like Mr. Mednick with all of his experience. So thank you, Mr. Burnett. That's a good question.
Billionaire Jim Fryer.
No, I think what happens is that it's based on what the mayor would be getting. It's not going to be zero because that's what he's actually getting. That's the way it works.
John.
Thanks, Josh. Attorney Mednick, I got a quick question. Is there an alternative? Can this be, I mean, I don't know what the law is. Can this be done through an ordinance? Can this be, if we leave out a numerical value, can this be picked up, via an ordinance? Like, are there any other mechanisms in place that?
You can do it, in the budget process. You can do it by ordinance, but it has to be approved by referendum.
Gotcha.
So
Right.
So if you were to act, so you don't need it in the charter. The reason that we've put it in charters is because charters are approved by referenda. You are effectively following the dictates of the statute that require the referendum approval.
I got it. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for clarifying. Okay.
Jalen.
Yeah, and to Johan's question, I think it's probably better to do it this way, so that the voters feel like they're approved. Because we were to change it and word it where we have the power to do it in ordinance, people probably feel like some type of mistrust there, because then we'll be able to pass it and it never has to go to them. So I think doing it this way is probably the best way to do it, just so that people feel like they have some type of buy-in.
Doug.
Yes, in line with Greg's thought, somebody might also ask, since we now currently earn about $600 a year, and $3,000 takes us up to about 5 times more, somebody might question that as well. So I just wanted to point that out.
I would just know. Oh, Johan, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say that I'm constantly asked, people are constantly surprised by the fact that, the level of compensation we get for doing what we do and stuff. So I always hear it. And they're always very surprised, always shocked to find out the amount of time that we put in, the amount of work that we put in, like Greg was saying about researching, getting up to speed with what's going on with the city. Yeah, everyone's always shocked. So I understand where Niki's coming from in terms of the imbalance and stuff. That's all.
Jalen and Nora.
Yeah, to Johan's point again, people are shocked that we actually have real jobs other than this. People think that this is our full-time job. So when they call us and everything, they're surprised when they you answer the phone and you're at work. So I think that Johan's right. They not as much time they spend, but they think that this is our full-time job and this is how we're supporting our families, which is just not true.
Nora.
So one very small point, but it was striking to me when Mr. Mednick was reading these the salaries. I don't know about everyone else, but my city issued laptop has truly bitten the dust. I believe I was one of the last people attempting to still use my city issued laptop. So there is also, I think, a genuine, all kidding aside, there's going to have to be a conversation about technology for the council coming up. We have compliance obligations for FOIL, among other things, and this is an issue that Darlene and I worked on last year as well. So there's also some world in which money is going to need to be spent on the council, and perhaps if we are also considering this as was it phrased in Bridgeport in terms of a way of allowing council members to acquire adequate technology that complies with our FOIL obligations. I'm putting out that out there as an expense that is likely to be on the city's radar one way or another fairly soon.
For what it's worth, I actually think that's an interesting point, the way of using it as a stipend versus for specific types of expenses as opposed to just compensation is an interesting idea. I would just note, the only thing I wanted to note was in the draft charter, just the language that's in the draft, the version of this that's in the draft charter doesn't change the $600 part of it, but does, I just want to make sure there was a portion of it to make sure that compensation be fixed by the council in accordance with applicable collective bargaining agreements, which I don't think is in the version in the proposed amendment by Nora. I just want to make sure that if that's language everyone agrees with, that makes it in one way or the other. And then obviously there was the stripping out of the referendum requirement in the charter because there's already a requirement under state law anyway. So I just want to make sure whether if this amendment were to pass or the version done by the Charter Revision Commission, that those two things are accepted one way or the other. Because I don't think anyone has an objection to those two things.
And if this was a question for me, it was the track changes were too hard to read if I was trying to show track changes on what I was trying to do in addition. So I was not objecting to either of those provisions.
Okay, I just wanted to put a pin in that just to make sure that we don't lose something in the process. That we end up that there is a consensus on actually anyway.
Well, I would have viewed it as a separate matter. Just for everybody's understanding, the power of establishing the compensation, ironically, has always been with you. And the new language there is in accordance with collective bargaining agreements, if applicable, except for the salary of council members.
Right.
So you've always had the ability. We wanted to put CBAs in there because it's just a fact of the modern world that a lot of these salaries are not being set by you except in compliance with a CBA.
Right. Nora, I guess before we move on from the rest of Article 4, there is another part of your proposal, and I don't want to forget about that.
Yes, no, and so this was the other item that I had suggested, and again, I think related to what we were hearing from other folks, which is to allow the council to appoint staff. So we, and as part of this, from a language perspective, I would suggest bringing the assistant city clerk into the council section as opposed to chapter 5 where it's currently located, which again is, so in general, I personally am of the opinion that the council would benefit from having some additional staff. I think we have been very lucky to have Esther. But I think that, again, to comments that many folks have made to me and other folks have expressed, we have a lot of constituents who are unhappy with the level of communication. They feel like the council does not communicate sufficiently. They find it hard to reach us. Any number of things. We can also talk about the fact that I think the council would benefit from having a finance person who reported directly to the council and could assist us, with finance related items. We potentially might also want someone who could help us with policy ideas. There's a lot of different things that could be done, and this would not require that any of those things happen. It would merely give the council authority to appoint additional staff beyond the assistant city clerk. So we are currently limited to that one position. The idea would be to give us the flexibility to hire additional positions if the council so voted to do so. And I think my proposal and the language, which again, I really leave to Steve, other councils have this authority in other parts of the state, so I'm sure we can borrow language. But I had suggested that it be something to the effect of a majority vote of the council be required in order to do that. So
Opening it up, anyone who wishes to discuss, this is section D of Nora's proposed amendment. Greg.
Yeah, I'm curious to the mechanism to make that work. How would a position be defined if a particular council member, and again, this is just conceptually, if they say, okay, we need additional help as it relates to understanding the finances, how is a job description created and created by whom? Is that job description then routed to the city HR department to post the position, to assist in the interview process of potential candidates, setting a salary range for that particular job? What's the mechanism to make this happen if we were to approve it?
Nora.
So I would assume that it would operate the same way that we currently handle the assistant city clerk. So my recollection is that the council developed a job description, had that job description posted, took resumes, and then I believe we all we voted eventually on the appointment of Esther as the assistant city clerk. So I would assume it would operate in pretty much the same manner. And I should add, I do think one step prior to that would potentially be required. And again, Mr. Mednick can weigh in on this. We might need to do a vote to create the position within the context of the budget, for instance, and then we would have to do the process of filling the position and voting on that person. That might actually be the better practice, since it would be the creation of a new position. Yeah, I don't know. I think Mr. Mednick, again, I know that other councils in the state have this authority, so I presume there is some way of doing that.
Yeah, that's different in different places. Like in New Haven, I think it started off relatively informally in 1969. But at this point, all of the staff employees are members of a collective bargaining unit. And so they're covered by CBAs, which is an interesting challenge, especially when you have line item authority, which they do. The director is not. Hartford, the city clerk, is an employee of the council, and the city clerk's staff works for the council. And I'm trying to remember, I can find out how that is done. But there are not too many others that have staff. I've got to tell you, Waterbury has no staff. Bridgeport has staff in their charter, but not in their budget. Stamford does have staff, and I believe that they are hired through the civil service process. Maybe the director not, but I think the remainder of the staff is hired through civil service.
Thank you, Steve. Jim.
So how much would this cost us? Is this person going to be a financial person? Is this person going to be clerical? Is it going to be a PR person? What happens to Esther now? Is she still part of working for the council? I think that, I'm not 100% against this, but I wouldn't want to vote on something like this until I saw a job description and specifically discuss what this person is going to do. This is just an open-ended position that we're going to pay somebody, and how much are we going to pay them? What's the salary gonna be?
So, yeah, so this position, this is the charter. So this would not create any position or require us to do anything. It would give us
understand.
the authority to do it. And so I think the idea would be that the council would determine what position they wanted. And again, my recommendation at this moment in time is very much in addition to Esther. We already have the authority to hire Esther, right? We already have the authority to hire- Sorry, my echo is bad. We already have the authority to hire an assistant city clerk. And so this would give us the authority to hire a second person if we so desired. In order to do that, again, I think the language that I've drafted is intended to require that the council vote to create that position. And then again, I think we would have to vote to appoint the actual person once the hiring process was complete. So what other positions we would create would be up to the council who has this authority. I obviously have opinions about what I think we need. I would very much like to see us hire someone with, communications capacity. I also would like to see us hire someone with finance capacity. Whether we need someone with finance capacity in part depends on the extent of our budgetary authority, right? But I think that the point here is to create the flexibility for a future council to define a position to meet the needs that they see going forward. So it also would potentially not be, right? The council may decide that, they don't need a second position, and then it wouldn't be voted for, and then it's an authority that sits until such time as the council needs it. So
is it
none of
one
those
position?
questions
So
could
is
be.
it one position, two positions? What is it? Is it staff? You mentioned staff.
Mhm.
That could be 5 people.
I mean, it could in theory. So again, we can
So
we can define
just
this.
a second,
Like,
Nora, just let me finish. For a half hour, we talked about how much it's going to cost to change the common council to the city council. And and as Greg said, we ought to know what the dollars are behind something like this. We just don't go in and say, okay, it's one of these things that just grows. It's a small little thing today. And then the next thing it's one person, it's 2 persons, it's 3 persons, and it's a staff of people that we have. And we're spending how much money? How much money is it that we were going to spend on this thing?
so I don't know. I mean, the point is that we could do so, not that we necessarily would do so, and we would have to defend and define that at the time that we wanted to make that appointment. So I personally, were I to be sitting in a council that had this authority, would be putting forward a recommendation that we hire a finance person for the council who reports to the council. And my guess is that that's a position that would, I don't know what the current range is. We'd have to look at Jared's salary. It would presumably be someone paid significantly less than Jared because he or she would not be managing the budget. They would merely be advising us. But that would be the conversation we'd have at the time, and the council would decide whether to vote to move forward with hiring that position or not.
What would this financial person do?
So again, if you would like my perspective on what I would recommend, which is not what's in this charter, right? This would be if I was doing this. I would strongly recommend that the council have a person who can independently evaluate the city budget, who can review and provide us recommendations based on the council's priorities, can inform us, can provide information as to their assessment based on, the budget as to questions that the council routinely asks of the CFO. Where is the rainy day fund in relation to other municipalities? What do we think? What is the return that we're getting on investment on this? Is there a different way that we may want to structure this that better reflects the council priorities? And again, I think this all relates to questions that we have talked about significantly already. If the council is going to pursue additional budgetary authority, we may want to have a budget person that works with the council to answer our questions, to help people, with, getting the specific line items information that they want, right? This is the kind of thing that, again, is routine in the legislature. Most legislative bodies have their own fiscal staff that can help balance out and serve as a check, an independent review of the executive's financial staff. So it's a fairly common position in a lot of legislative bodies for that reason. That may or may not be what a future council wants to do. I will also put forward, again, we hear an enormous amount of constituent concern about communications. I know that Esther has done a great deal to try to do that in addition to all of her other job duties. But we may also decide that Esther needs an assistant. That would be a much cheaper hire, right? We might need someone who is fairly young and has a lot of social media experience and could have a significant communications role to try to meet needs that our constituents have asked for. I don't know, because none of that would need to be decided. The issue is, does the council have authority to have its own staff or not? And that would be what would be there would only be the only part of it that would be in the charter.
So much that
Jalen,
I
Greg.
gotta go back here. I mean, so let's start off with the financial numbers that you mentioned. Are you not getting information of where we stand on the fund balance? Do you not get any information that's satisfying from the CFO, from our financial staff that we have today? I mean, you know, the finance committee looks at all of these numbers constantly. And they don't have any other staff to do it. We bring in somebody from the CFO's office and they give us the information. We ask questions and get a good idea of what it is. I just don't see the need for this. And it's an open-ended thing. I don't know how much we're ever going to spend. I'm just against this. I mean, I think it's building a staff where we don't need a staff right now. You know, when we get to the point where Esther is totally overwhelmed and we've just piled too much on her, and we have a real need because we're not getting the information from the finance department, we're not getting you know, public relations done the way we think it should be done, fine, then let's talk about it. But I don't think this is the right time for something like this. I don't see any justification for it at all. That's all I have to say.
Jalen.
Yeah, I think we're kind of going. I think this is like Councilwoman, Councilperson Najus Gagner said. This is just talking about powers. This isn't. I think we're starting to talk about positions where that's something that's down the road. This just gives us the power to do it, which I think is a pretty good idea. Just to give us the power to be able to do it. And we could talk about the amount when that happens. We don't necessarily even have to hire anybody. We could just keep it where the power is and not hire anybody. But talking about like the dollar amounts of financial person, I think that's just an idea that we have, and we could do a lot more.
Greg.
I'm not in favor of this movement. And it, you know, to use the word power, we could potentially be hiring someone in a position making $60,000, which is 10,000% more than we are making. That's real power. I mean, that's real power. I'll leave it there. That's real power.
Nora.
I just wanted to very briefly comment. Oops, was in no way suggesting that I'm not getting answers from Mr. Schmidt. I would say that I had a very different feeling under Mr. Dakowitz. So I just wanted to make sure that I was making clear my respect for Mr. Schmidt and his answers to questions.
Jalen.
Yeah, I think that real power, I think that's why people kind of elect us. And I think they want us to have real power. So that would kind of be my argument to that, is because I think people elect us and they think that we have real power that right now we really don't have. So I think that real power is something that I think that's what people elect us to, and they kind of expect us to have it. So I think this just kind of gives us the power that people think that we already have.
I was saying that facetiously. I mean, it makes no sense. If we're making $600 a year and we're hiring positions that's $60,000 a year, 10,000% more than we're making, Is that an example of power? That's an example of poor management. I just don't see the reason and the rationale in terms of why we would do something like that.
But I mean, we already hired Esther. And we do vote on like, I mean, the mayor is the one who hires, but we approve the hiring of all of the chiefs. So I mean, we hire people that make more than like 1,000 more percent than what we make. So I think we already do it. This would give us the power to really have more control over it, because we already signed off on the hiring of chiefs of staff and everything that make way more than we do. So I think we kind of already have something like that, but it just goes through the mayor. This just gives us the power to do it. And I mean, we do it with Esther already. So it's something that we already do. Esther makes a lot more than we make.
Jim.
Jalen, I think you're twisting this a little bit too much, but we don't hire a chief of staff. We approve a budget for the mayor, and the mayor hires his chief of staff. It's the same thing with every one of the operating divisions. We approve their budget, okay? And eventually we approve their budget. And we have the financial information available from the CFO and answer any questions that you want to bring up. That's I think what we're not going out and hiring somebody for us. I mean, what Greg is saying, that why would we go out and hire a $60,000 accountant to do the same thing that we got a CFO and a whole staff of other people to do? This doesn't make sense at all.
But I think to that point though, like with the we actually approved the CFO, and we approved the chief economic community development. Like that came to the council that we had to sign off on it. So that's not their, we do approve their budget, but we do approve them being hired as well. So that's not twisting it. That's actually real powers that we have done in the last year. So I mean, that's what, and I think we're getting tied up on Councilperson Najewski and what she would do and her suggestion about who we will hire. But this just gives us the power to hire whatever position that we think the council might need. And I think that that's something that I think we're getting kind of twisted in it, where we're not talking about a financial person. That's just one suggestion. This is just talking about the powers to hire somebody, which we hire people, or we sign off or approve the hiring of people all the time. So I don't think I'm twisting it. It's just we approve Mr. Schmidt, and we approve Jay Hibansky a few months ago. So there's something that we do approve the hiring of people whenever there's an opening.
Those are appointments that are made, but we're not picking their salaries, and we're not responsible for their salaries. They work for somebody else. They work for the mayor, and they come under the mayor's salary, or they come under, or I should say, his budget. That's my point.
Okay, well, Steve, you know where to file this one. I don't mean to make light of it. I'm just saying there's clearly a difference of opinion here. And Steve, you're on mute.
So this will not be on the list.
I'm
Or
sorry.
is this?
This is the
will
list of things we're going to need to vote on.
Okay, so this
Like-
will be.
Like these
Well-
are proposed amendments. There's gonna almost certainly need to be an up and down vote on Nora's
All right, so
amendment.
there's so some of them are items where there are consensus, and others are items where there will be discussion, is what it comes down
Yes,
to.
that's correct. So this is a discussion item. Nicole, I'm sorry, unless you have something to say.
Oh,
on
no,
this
that's
one.
okay. Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Nora, for all this work. I was thinking more of a person who could be, like an assistant. Help us return phone calls, help us draft up emails, help us get briefed on what's coming for the day, being some of us have to work like 100 hours just to make it work. Some like an assistant, somebody that can help us do stuff like that. That's the type of position that I was thinking of for it, that I think would be good. Getting back to constituents a little bit easier. I know we can't do things in a group. I mean, maybe, you know what I mean? Set up the meeting, set up the Zoom call. Like we're doing all of this ourselves. And sometimes it is taken away from, well, for me, because I'm working, it's taken away from some of my hours. You know what I mean? And I do want to be more effective because I do enjoy what I'm doing. So that's the type of person I'm thinking of, an assistant on kind of on that level. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing as, and I'm looking at, again, Article 4, I assume, unless there are any other objections to any of the items in the draft charter, and I'm looking at them, there are 3 items listed on the transmittal letter. I'm assuming there are no objections to those 3. Well, I'm saying those 3, but I'm saying, I mean, obviously the Charter Revision Commission has their own changes to 4-7.c that we discussed earlier. But I'd like to pick up Article 5, there's no changes. Article 6, repealing the office of the sheriff. Does anyone have any objections to that? Or, okay. Article 7. Nora, I know there's a proposed amendment on this one. Before I get to the amendment, are there any, and because there are a series of revisions done by the Charter Commission on Article 7, does anyone have any objections or want to discuss any of the revisions made by the Charter Revision Commission?
Are we on, I'm sorry, are we on 7 to A3?
So here's what, okay, so right now I am talking about, there's a page length of recommendation of revisions listed out by the Charter Revision Commission on Article 7. I'm asking, does anyone want to discuss any of the revisions done by the Charter Revision Commission? And then we will get into, Nora has an amendment to 7-2. So I'm asking, again, as a group, are there any that we want to single out here? And if not, if there's a consensus and we intend to recommend inclusion of these revisions, that's what I'm looking to ascertain right now.
Well, I'm just, maybe I'm just getting punchy here now because it's getting later. Is Nora's comment that we're going to talk about relating to the
BET?
The BET with
This is the amendment
increasing-
regarding mayor and council designee as ex officio.
And Mark,
Yeah.
Josh, but I do think that Jim was just saying 7-2A3. So there is a proposal from the Charter Revision Commission regarding 7-2A3. And that is the
Yes,
requirements that
yes, that's correct. And Jim, yes.
Yeah, I think that's the one that I also may object to. So I think that we should just put that on to be voted list. Do we have to debate all of these things in great detail now? If we know that we're going to have some people for it and some people against it, should we just put it on the to be voted on list and save, because it is 9:15 already?
Yeah, I guess what I would say, and I appreciate you raising that, and Jim, maybe I was getting a bit punchy myself, was, let me rephrase it a different way, and I like the way Nora phrased it earlier in the meeting. I'm going to steal her phrasing, which is, does anyone, I'm going to ask, do people either there seems to be at least one objection to 7-283, the way phrased by the Charter Revision Commission. Are there other people who object to this phrasing? Okay. Are there people who support this phrasing? Or the revision by the Charter Revision Commission? Nora. Okay. Anne. Okay. So
So
then,
is that something we can just put on the list of, to
yeah,
be,
well, that's what
rather than like
I'm
go through
building the
agony?
record for that.
Yeah, right.
So
I'll move it over there for discussion.
yes,
Not a consensus item, a discussion item.
that
Okay.
one is not a consensus item, and Nora,
Nora has a proposed modification of that. I
right,
think.
she has a proposed modification to 7-2A1.
Oh,
It is
Correct,
possible
Nora?
that yes, but it is possible that that is a typo. Let me double
I
check.
think it's A3. I think it's A3.
I think it's
It
A3.
is
I think it's
A3?
A3.
Okay,
Yes.
I was just looking at the way Nora
No,
wrote.
I agree. I think the numbering got messed up. I think it is A3.
Okay. All right, so then let's talk about Nora's amendment, or at least, has everyone reviewed Nora's amendment, first of all?
Well, and just to be clarified, it is not my amendment. It is Darlene's amendment. I merely volunteered to do the drafting of it, but it is Darlene's amendment.
Okay, then Darlene, would you like to, let me open it this way. Darlene, is there any words you'd like to say about this particular amendment? Are there, I want to entertain discussion and give people the opportunity to say something if they wish to.
I can barely hear you. So you said just, so it's about the BET, and I think when I first mentioned it, gosh, some time ago, I just want to know at this point, what were you all saying? Do you want to talk about this now or put this off?
So the first part of this discussion was about Lisa, and basically whether Lisa suggested that we put the revision suggested by the Charter Revision Commission, whether that is something there's a consensus on or whether there's not a consensus. Clearly in this meeting, there has been a determination that there is not a consensus on this
On that one.
particular provision
Okay.
from the Charter Revision Commission.
Right.
I am then asking about the amendment, the proposed amendment, which is in the same section.
Right.
So now what I'm asking is there a consensus, or frankly, I'm trying to ascertain whether there is a consensus on this proposal.
Okay.
Okay.
So you asked me then did I want to say something about it? I just
I wanted to
clear
give you an
about where
opportunity
guys
if you
were
wanted to
because I
talk
jumped
about it.
off. So I think you all had pretty extensive conversations around it at the last couple of meetings. I know that I heard when it was initially brought up, a few people who had questions about it. But I do think that it is a much needed change that we can have within the budget process, and how we as council members can have more input in this process. And I see that as a good move for us. As we all know, the BET is one of the strongest committees and most powerful, really. They have a lot of control over our budget. And I think we need to have, as council members who ultimately have to vote on these things, should have greater input and say, and I think it builds relationships and communication with the BET. How many people that is, that ends up being, I think that's something that we can talk about. That's one position. I know that there was initially conversation around council members already having enough to do, and having one more responsibility seems like a lot to put on folks. But we put a lot on ourselves when we have to go through this budget in the way that we do. And I think we need a voice on that committee. That doesn't, to me, take away anything from the BET. I think they do their job well. I think in this process, though, as council, we need to be more engaged and have a seat at that table. Whether that's a voting right, position or not, that's something that we can talk about. But I think having a seat at that table and giving us more insight and opportunity to have conversations with the BET I think is the right thing to do. And the right move for us as a council moving forward. You know, we don't have a lot of authority to begin with.
Lisa.
So, Darlene, I'm just trying to understand. So this is the suggestion that there's one council person that goes to sit on the BET board.
Right.
That's your proposal. And my
Right.
concern with that is that each of us council people, we represent our district. We don't represent the council as a whole. And in this situation, I'm a little concerned that how do you pick that person, and who you pick is how that vote goes. So if it's a chair, we've had 8-7 votes, we've had 9-6 votes and things like that. So I'd be fine with a non-voting position, but
That's what I think too. So that's what I'm saying. We can talk about that as far as the vote goes, but I think having that voice at the table and voicing our concerns in a more rational and reasonable time, to me, just makes sense. Too many times, to me, we've sat around our caucus table talking about things and then having to go back, right? And not having any real conversation with BET members, and then they come back to us with something in writing. So how do we change that dynamic? I'm okay with not having a voting, position there, but someone who's attuned to it, that understands it, that's willing to bring back, share what council's thoughts are, and vice versa. I just think it can be done. And I don't see, if we feel like that person doesn't need to have a voting position, I'm okay with that. Particularly when we're talking about making sure that there are representatives on the BET from each district. I mean, so I'm okay with that, whether, we have a party and district requirement to fill. I don't see where that's a loss for us. I think it's a win-win. And I don't know, Steve, if you've, in your encounters across the state or otherwise have seen roles like this with bodies that make this decision. Like the council needs to be more engaged and have some sort of voice at those tables.
Nora.
So, and Steve may want to jump into Darlene's question before
Please.
Yeah, if you don't mind, yeah, I've seen it both ways, Darlene. In New Haven, to this day, there is a representative of the Board of Alders that sits on the City Plan Commission with full voting rights. There was a member when we had a Coliseum Authority, sat on the Coliseum Authority with full voting rights. In other communities, they're put on as non-voting members. When they have full voting rights, you need to be mindful of minority party representation rules, so that they need to be appointed in that context. But if it's non-voting, you don't have to worry about that because they don't have a vote, and therefore they don't affect that. But I've seen it both ways.
Thank you, Steve. So Ms. Ayers has stepped off. So I will reiterate something that she said to me in relation to this, which is that because it is an extraordinary ask of someone's time, she felt it would be disrespectful to have that person have to attend all those meetings and yet have no vote, which I honestly kind of agreed with. And I think that, so, again, we can do this whatever way we want. If folks want to do it as a non-voting, and that is, it's fine. My instinct on wanting to do it as a voting member was, I think Ms. Ayers' point sort of pushed me towards that. But the more I thought about it, I also thought that, it would provide a significant amount of balance that we have been talking about, wanting to give the council more voice. The council representative sitting there is some voice. A vote is actual voice and actual power. I also think that the math just would then happen to work out. You would have 7 members, the mayor would be 1 member, the council representative would be 1 mayor, and you would have 5 other people, one of whom represented each district. So in that sense, otherwise you end up with the mayor, 6 members, 5 of whom have to be for a different district, and then 1 random floating person plus a council member sitting there all the time. So the other thing, I think, to Ms. Shanahan's point, I mean, that is again the nature of representative democracy. If the council votes by a majority vote, then yes, you represent what the majority wants. And if that's an 8-7, then you're still representing what the majority wants. That is the nature of a majority, governance system. So yeah, I think that would be the expectation. And the draft proposal would have the council vote by a majority vote to designate who that person would be. My assumption is that in practice, it would probably primarily be the council finance chair. But anyway, so I think all that is, can be there. It's either option. It could be a voting or a non-voting. I personally would recommend the voting, but if it gets us to consensus on non-voting, I will take consensus.
So just to, I'm just trying to cut to the chase because I know it's 9:30 and we still have so much to do. So here's how I come in, and you can put me on one list or the other. If it's non-voting, I favor it. If it's voting, I don't favor it. So then you can put it on the list, Josh, about consensus or not, like whether it's agreed. Because if everybody feels strongly about voting, then I say no voting, and then we put it on the thing to be voted up or down. Does that help? I'm just trying to get to Nora's big issues.
I like your efficiency.
Okay. All right. Since there seems to be at least one person who strongly favors it being a voting position, then this is going to go on the discussion list unless anyone feels differently. Okay. I'm moving on to Article 8.
Johan has I don't want to speak for him, but I believe he has an item that would be in Article 7 relating to the appointments. Am I correct? Am I right, Johan?
Yeah, you're correct, Steve.
John,
Thank
I
you for
apologize.
catching. No, it's totally okay. It's thank you, Steve, for the reminder.
I'm trained to represent my clients. So I just
appreciate that.
Okay. I'll let you explain. I just wanted to hold your place.
Yeah, let me just see here. This is the one that I proposed regarding the list, the roster of yes. So the thinking behind this was to provide council members an advanced list or advanced roster of applicants who's applied, when they've applied, the boards and commissions they've actually applied to give us ample time to be able to review and assess their credentials and make a better informed decision. So that was the thinking behind this. The 30 days and 7 days, that's just something that it's just a start to discussion to see what everyone else thinks. But that's essentially the rationale behind my thinking to put this forward. So I'm happy to hear what everyone else thinks. Actually, I want to hear what everyone else thinks.
Anyone else? Jim?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think it makes a lot of sense. We're always at the 11th hour trying to ask who knows somebody and who would speak for them, and then we've had one instance where at the last minute we had to yank a name. So I think it makes all the sense in the world. It's due diligence, I believe it's called.
Oh, let me add too that the list provided to council would be confidential.
Don't push it, Joanne. Don't push it.
The list would be the list. Obviously, it would be confidential. I mean, initially, what I thought was like, all right, let's place this in the public domain. But I had a great conversation with Menek, and so which then led me to believe that okay, yeah, it's better to kind of maybe keep it somewhat confidential instead of kind of just putting it out in the system. So yeah. Anyway, so I'll let everyone else go ahead and take provide any comments.
Well, I guess we can work on the days, but there seems to be a pretty good feeling about this one. So
I'm 2 for 2. Okay, man.
Yeah, no, Steve, I think we can add this to the
consensus list.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, let's work out the days, Johan, and figure out,
Yeah, and you can either work them out. Don't kill yourself on it because it's something that could be done over on the council side, unless the commission side, and we'll just continue to have a dialogue so
Yeah.
that when it comes back to you, you'll be comfortable with it. That's the
Yep.
bottom line.
But
So you're
I-
asking us to, yeah.
the one thing that the only concern I had on this one was about, what happens if you miss a deadline? Are these, are these going to be too hard to track for staff kind of thing? When does the clock run kind of stuff? But overall, I didn't have any substantive issues with this one.
I mean, that's something we can ask them. We can kind of get their input just to
Yeah,
kind
I
of
mean, it's
make
just
sure it's as
about- 'cause
complete
at
as
some point-
possible.
Remember, anytime when we write an ordinance or a charter, someone's got to track this, right? Otherwise we're just doing this and, if no one's
Yeah.
paying attention, like what's the point?
And
So
that would be another point, Josh, that I think you're bringing up that's really quite perceptive. Maybe you leave the establishment of timelines to an ordinance so that you can change it from time to time. If you lock in firm timelines in the charter, they may seem reasonable right now, but they may alter at some point. So I just wanted to raise that as a possibility.
okay. But Steve, yeah, I think you can add that one to the consensus list.
Okay, great.
Okay, and Johan, I apologize for not having that on my.
No, Josh, totally
It
fine.
just wasn't in
totally fine.
front of me, as it should have been. Okay. Article 8, there were not, unless anyone has any issues, there were not any. Let me put it this way: in the numerous workshops we've had, I don't think anyone's brought up anything from Article 8. I don't think Nora has presented any suggested amendments in Article 8. So I think we can, unless anyone has any objections or discussion, I think we can put this on the consensus list. All the revisions by the Charter Commission that we're fine with them. There were no changes to Article 9. And there are no, as far as I remember or recall, there are no proposed amendments to Article 9. And now we are at Article 10, where there are. Okay. Let's start this the way we started this before. Just looking at the revisions done by the Charter Revision Commission. Are there any, and again, I refer you to the transmittal letter. Obviously, the actual charter has it too. Are there revisions done by the Charter Revision Commission that anyone has any objections to? Okay. I'm taking that as a no.
I'm sorry, Josh.
Sorry,
Yes,
Nora.
I did have an objection to 1016, but we can, so we could talk about that at the end.
Right, because it also corresponds with your amendment. Correct?
Oh, yes, I muted myself before I said, yep.
Okay. All right. So then, Nora, why don't we talk about your amendments and why don't we do it sequentially?
Sure. And I mean, to Lisa Shanahan's point, we have potentially done this to death. I don't know if people want to actually discuss them or just agree that all of these are going up for a vote.
Well, I want to look, I mean, this is a workshop. And I
That's
realize-
fine. No, that's fine.
and
I'm
I realize
totally-
it's late. I get it. But just as a reminder of the calendar, we have a meeting, on the 22nd where we really do have to make decisions on all these things. And, there is no more time to schedule another workshop. So if someone has something to say, this is the moment. So I want to give people the opportunity to say what they need to say. And I realize it's late, and I know it's late. I've been up since super early in the morning too. I get it. But I want to give people the opportunity, should they want it.
Oh, absolutely. So I will try to be
So-
very succinct though in just describing it and if people have questions. So the first proposal is what we could describe as the 2 cap proposal. And the idea again is that there will be at the same meeting 2 separate caps set, one for the Board of Ed and one for the rest of the city budget. I did want to offer a clarification based on a question Jared had asked me today. There is no intent in this language, and I will double check with Steve that the language does not do so. There is nothing that then limits the BET from changing either of those caps within their review. So for the original, for the proposals that would be under 10.5 and what would become the new section 10.6, all that is different from, truly all that is different from the current budget process is that there is 2 caps set, and that those 2 caps then allow there to also be a report made to the BET and the council of a cap compliant budget by both the Board of Education and the rest of the city. And again, these are not set in stone. This is just like the budget that gets proposed in January. It gives the BET something to work with in terms of these are the line items that are being proposed. And the BET would then have the authority, as they currently do, to make changes to the line items for the city and to make changes to the cap for the Board of Ed. So that would be the intent of this sort of 10.5 and new 10.6.
Can I ask a question of you, Nora, on that? Because isn't the cap the situation where the BET can't go above the cap unless they come back to us? So if there were 2 caps and the BOA was one and the city's the other, then they would have to come back to us if they were going to change, if they were going to go above those, right?
Correct. They would have to come back to us if they wanted to go above them.
Okay, good. So because we know we disagree on this, can we just all agree that we'll just put that on the list to vote? Because we talked about this one a lot, right, at the last meeting?
We have, but I also am cognizant of the fact that, you know, not every council member has been to every one of these meetings. And obviously we knew that's where this was going to end up, but I also want to give people the ability to say something if they have some thoughts on this item, should they want to. So I just want to, I want to be fair here. Jim.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I think I was looking at Joanne's spreadsheet, which is very helpful when we take a look at some of these things. And I look at the reason for the changes. It adds transparency, it forces clearer budget disciplines for each side, and I don't agree with those things at all. This doesn't give us any more transparency. It gives us no more clarity on how numbers are put together. There really is no rhyme or reason to break this out. All the numbers are broken out in all the analysis we get from the CFO, and the only thing that changes is now if the BET was going to change one of the cap numbers, we got to do it twice. So I'm against this. I just don't see the reason for it. So that's all.
Okay. Does anyone else have any thoughts or questions, concerns? And I guess since Nora phrased it this way, we're talking about 10.5 and 10.6 together. Okay. All right, Steve, put it on the list. Okay. Now, I'm sorry.
Well, so to be clear, right, it's
Yeah,
10.5.
I think I said this incorrectly. I want to
Right.
take this back here. I'm sorry, Nora.
No, I was just gonna say, so it's 10.5 and what would be a new 10.6.
A new 10, yes.
So if this was approved, we then would have to renumber all of the sections following after it. But I didn't want to create additional confusion by doing that. So this would be 10.5 and new 10.6.
And then this other 10.6.
So this other 10.6 follows from that. And this is again relates to my conversations with Jared. If we were to do this, would need to be extra time so that the budgets of the Board of Ed and the council and the rest of city that were being put in to have a cap compliant proposed budget would need extra time to be able to do that process. And then the second, so that would be the March 30th to April 11th change. The second addition there is something that Mr. Burnett had suggested, I don't even know how many meetings ago, that there be a specific requirement that the BET meet with the council. And again, this may be less necessary if there is an approval of the addition of a council member to the BET. But even if in that case, I mean, to the point that Ms. Shanahan made, where the council representative on the BET is representing the majority position, it still might be beneficial for there to be a meeting between the BET and the entirety of the council such that everyone could express their particular individual concerns. So that would be the second addition there to that section.
Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns? This one's, it's hard to break it out because what you're saying, Nora, is that this is connected with your other amendments. So this is also getting added to the discussion list just by default. But
Correct. I mean, if the other amendments don't pass, then I don't know that the date needs to change. Although again, I think Mr. Schmidt can weigh in on that if.
yeah, I was actually going to ask if Mr. Schmidt has any questions or anything like that.
Hey, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
That's fine. Yep.
Great. Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to be heard on this. So I guess one question that I had to do with the last amendment. When I looked at the language, it talked about the BET proposing appropriations that are equal to the cap. But I think what I heard you say when you were talking about it was that that's not the intent, and that what the BET could approve could be less than the cap, as long as it didn't go over the cap. So it's more of a traditional conventional cap. It's not a
Yes.
finite
Sorry.
dollar amount.
Which section are you talking about?
I think he's
In
talking about
10 the new
10.6.
10.6.
The new
10.6
10.6. Okay.
B.
The new 10.6B.
Nora, it's the sentence.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. Yes, the equals, right, it should be does not exceed.
Okay. Okay.
So Nora, is that
Good.
is that a clarification or language that you're going to amend here?
Yes, I will check. And to be clear, yes, and this is the kind of language that Steve will check, but you're absolutely correct. It should say does not exceed, not equals. And again, sorry, and actually I will work with Steve on this, but again, this, to be clear, is not about this section B here, right? This is not about the BET's authority. This is the requirement that there be a budget proposal made that would be compliant with the cap, right? So none of that changes the ability of the BET to then make changes. This is what's going to the BET for them to work off of, right? So the BET would still have all the power it currently has to go under the cap, to make a proposal to the council that would go over the cap. This is just the language that that covers that that draft budget proposal. But you and I can work with this with Mr. Mednick to make sure, but that the language is correct.
Yep, and I understand that, and in that light, I agree. It was just when I saw the equals there, that's what was throwing me off, and I think was different than what had been proposed previously.
Yeah, no, I agree. It should be does not exceed.
Nora, if you can get me your latest language, because it's not tracking with what I thought was the latest language, that would be helpful.
Sure, I will send that to you again. I apologize. Yep.
Okay.
I'm now going to move on, Nora, to 10.7.
Yes. Okay, so 10.7 then there is a small date change here, which is from April 1st to April 18th. Again, that was Mr. Smith's recommendation. And then this is the provision that relates to what happens after the BET has made all of its alterations and recommendations, right? And the existing authority is that the council may then override the BET by 2/3 vote. but the existing authority essentially limits the council to decreasing that amount, because if you look at the existing provisions, after the council does its 2/3 vote override, there is no requirement that the BET appropriate or spend anything that the council allocates in an increase of what the BET had allocated. So in essence, it is a hollow authority. So what this language is, the first part of what this language is intended to do is to effectuate our existing authority, which is to say, if the council goes through the 2/3 override process, whatever the council approves, up, down, increase, decrease, that amount should be what the BET's final allocation then is, because otherwise there's really no point in having the council have override authority. The second part of the proposal then goes beyond that and says that in the event that the council is utilizing its override authority, the council should have the authority to decide what that override is used for. So under the current provisions, if the council votes to override, all we can do is change the total amount. So the council could, in theory, put in do an override and increase the amount by $1 million, but the council cannot say what that $1 million is used for. Again, to my mind, that is too limited of an authority for the elected body. I think that the council should be able to do the 2/3 override and specify what that override is to be used for, and whether that's to take money away from a specific line or to increase a specific line. I think the council should have that authority. So that's essentially what I'm proposing. The option 2 I had put forward as a potential compromise position, which would allow the override, but would not allow the line item authority. It would only allow the council to sort of make an expression of intent. Since I think we do not have consensus anyway, and no one has particularly picked up on any interest in sort of that option, I'm inclined to merely take a vote on option 1, unless other people feel otherwise.
All right. Before Johan, Jared, I just want to give you the opportunity if you have any questions or anything, because you have your screen on.
Yes, thank you again. And this might be more for Steve, because the BET kind of is the de facto traditional Board of Finance in performing that role. And so I don't know what happened. What is the effect if you give if we were to give the Common Council the authority to, I think the way I read it, to override decisions by the BET, and does that kind of move the kind of Board of Finance role to the Common Council? And is there an impact of that? What's the effect of that?
That's a question for me.
If whoever wants to answer it.
Yeah, I would be curious on your thoughts on that, Steve. I don't know if there is some particular meaning to being a Board of Finance that is relevant or is
Now,
different or important.
when you have a charter, you can define what a Board of Finance would do and what a legislative body would do. So you're modifying current custom in your town is what you're doing. But there's nothing inappropriate or illegal about it. You're not operating under the town statutes that would give a Board of Finance kind of a statutory authority that you couldn't modify locally. But once you go to a charter form of government, you have greater flexibility to create the systems that best work for your community. I don't know how else to answer that.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
Johan, then Lisa.
Thanks, Josh. I mean, and looking at this, option 2 to me appears to be kind of closer to best practices for cities and towns that have independent boards, because option 1 seems to kind of blur the legislative versus fiscal management lines. But And at the same time, with option two, um, I don't know if it puts into question the institutional roles, right? Because now you're empowering the council to, I don't want to say micromanage, but it kind of, I think it may create some issues. But all right, the point being, I mean, I'm just kind of looking at this. Option one could possibly work. And looking at Nora's proposal, I mean, it could work, but if you structure it very carefully where you don't, with limitations to prevent overreach from the council and, avoid some of the disruptions to the bonding projections, although it's not directly involved, but it's part of the overall fiscal pie. And so I'm thinking about this. I mean, you could possibly try and cap percentage of the city side's operating budget that the council can amend, so that that prevents kind of avoids broad rewrites while allowing some flexibility. I mean, you can also require the council to issue a public impact memo on what it expects to for each actual proposed change, and then maybe even require the CFO to provide his own memo as well when he thinks the impact might potentially be, or even limit entirely the items that or the areas that the council can actually amend. So I'm still working through this and it's kind of still marinating in my brain. So that's all. I just kind of want to put that out there for food for thought.
Nora.
Oh,
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Johan. I think those are all, certainly provisions worth considering. If, by all means put forward proposals on that, I think I would certainly be willing to, and interested in talking about them. I think that the practice on this council having been quite conservative, I have trouble imagining that the overrides are going to be particularly substantial. I do think that there again are likely to be sort of very specific cases where the council has a particular program or project or a particular disagreement. And again, I do think that the 2/3 vote requirement, which is again the existing requirement, is a pretty substantial check on any likelihood of this being a power that is used particularly dramatically. But by all means, I think if you have additional options you want to put forward, you should definitely do that, because I think those are all worth considering here.
Well done, Nora. Thanks.
so I wanted to ask Jared what his impression is and how he thinks that this might operate with city budgeting, et cetera, just to get your impression about this idea.
I guess what I would say, because a lot of these, a lot of these questions are more political in nature. So I don't want to, I'm trying to not to weigh in on those in those, get into those weeds on it. But
Yeah, I'm not asking politically, I'm more like
but
structurally how this would work and if you've had the experiences in other cities with your CFO job.
yeah, so I know that every town is different, and it's the legislative body's role is different. So for example, in Fairfield, the way that the authority that the RTM has in Fairfield after the Board of Finance has approved the budget, the RTM has the ability to reduce the budget. They're not allowed to increase it, and they are not allowed to mess with revenues in any way. So that's their only authority, is to reduce the budget. And I think Steve may have some other examples of other towns and what they do. But there's in Norwalk, I think my opinion generally of changes to the charter is, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And Norwalk has a good record, AAA rating. And so I just, I would just hesitate and making too many changes, because I think that structure, the process, They all contribute to that. It's not the only factor. It's not the only thing that's going to determine the fiscal state of the city, but certainly it has some impact on it. And I think the process as it stands now seems to have worked well, and has kept taxes pretty low. I think has continued to allow the city to provide services that it needs, and while also, like I said, maintaining the AAA rating. So that's all I would say, just as a caution to making too broad of changes and shifting the balance that's in the process now.
Jim, then Nora.
Yeah, I just think a follow up on that. I think Jared brings up some very good points, you know, and I looked ahead, you know, if we look at 10.9, it goes on to talk about how the BET has to also analyze the budgeted revenues that are coming in, and then be able to set the mill rate and what the taxes are going to be by district. And one of those things is, if you got somebody that's going to start to change the line items in a budget, that without knowing what the impact is going to be on what our revenues look like, that can be kind of foolhardy. So I think that, you know, I agree with everything that Jared just said, and I think we've just got to be very, very careful about this. I'm fine with, you know, option number 2, where we're giving direction on where we think it should go, where cuts should go, or where maybe I'm not for doing anything above the cap. I mean, we've, you know, the council has come in and looked at everything that the CFOs looked at, the mayors looked at, the individual department heads looked at, and said, okay, this is what our total limit of what I can spend is. To come back after the BET might have lowered something and say, no, we want to bring it up higher, that's really not the purpose of what the cap is. The cap is just setting an absolute limit as to what we have to spend. BET comes in and is able to save us some more money, that's great. But I don't think it's, it's not, doesn't make sense to come back and start fooling around with individual line items. That's it.
Nora.
Thanks, Josh. So, I'm going to push back a little bit with great respect for Mr. Schmidt. I think that, as you said, there's many senses in which this is a political question. I don't think the system is not broken. I don't think the system is working for a lot of our constituents. I think I hear a great deal from constituents about their dissatisfaction with their voice in the process. And I think most of that can be traced to the sort of bifurcation between the BET and the council. Working within the limits of maintaining much of the system that we currently have, I think that providing some safety valve for, again, when the public feels strongly that the BET did not get it right, or when the council members who have a great deal of experience with what the city needs feel that the BET did not get it right, it's really important that there be that safety valve. And that's, what this particular provision is really intended to provide, is a way for the council to fix errors, because we are the people who ultimately, A, are answerable to our constituents, and B, have the oversight function over the departments themselves, and thus are able to realize where well-intentioned but not ultimately in the best interest of the city's decision may have occurred. And Mr. Farrer and I have been back and forth on this many times, so I won't belabor it too much. But a standout example for me is the cutting of the webmaster position by 6 months. It saved the city an minuscule amount of money, but caused us to lose a highly qualified candidate and ultimately led to the end of the entire job search for that position. I suspect that had the council had the ability to override for that specific issue, we likely would have done so because it meets an enormous need for our constituents, was not a substantial cost savings, et cetera. So my point is that I think the council has the full capacity to do this. And I do think that the system is not working well in many ways for our constituents. You know, the bottom line financials are not the only things that we have to do to govern well. Nor quite frankly, do I think that even that is really the right way potentially to think about a budget. I am much more interested in sort of return on investment and the impact of the decisions that we make. So again, I think that is a place where understanding constituent needs and concerns and what investments sort of would meet those, it would be highly valuable. So again, to not belabor, but that's sort of my 2 cents on, I do think there are problems in the system. I think our constituents think there are problems in the current system.
Jim and Lisa.
Yeah, we keep talking about it. It's not the system's not broken, so let's try not to fix it. And I think Jalen brought that up a couple of days ago, and I don't think maybe that's not the right way to put it. All the constituents I talk to about budgeting don't. Well, first of all, most people in the city don't have a clue as to how the process works. Okay. And when I explain it to them, now they do understand it. And it's not the system that they're concerned about. They're concerned about spending by different departments. And let's face it, the biggest complaint they have is the spending with the BOE. On one hand, 50% of the people think we're not spending enough money on education. And the other 50% that are older billionaires like myself that somebody mentioned before, that live on a single income, and my fixed income is not keeping up with tax increases because the BOE asks for more money every year. So that's where the situation is. We've got a very when we had meetings, when Steve Mednick brought representatives from other municipalities to tell us about the budgeting process, many of them were very interested in how we did and Mr. Schmidt made a nice presentation of how we work. They were all very, very in favor. So that's a good way. That seems like a pretty good system. We go along with that. We might want to do something along those lines. Okay. Is it absolutely perfect? No, maybe not. So we can continually work to make it a good system. But right now it's a system that has proven very well over the years that we've been able to maintain a AAA rating. We've been able to Nora, it's funny that I agree with you 100% about looking at return on investment. Henry Dakowitz brought that up one time and almost got ran out of town because he said he wanted to see the return on investment on the BOE. That's absolutely true. And we've got the tools now, and Jared's working on better tools that are going to help us do that job even more efficiently going forward. So, to start to tinker with this on how we're going to have the council be involved in it, making changes to various items, the idea of the webmaster. I also question a couple of people about what a webmaster actually does. And, I was surprised at how many different answers I got what a webmaster really does. We can do plenty of work with in the IT function. I've said it over and over again. There's plenty of opportunities in the IT area, both in the city and then also in the BOE. So I think we've got a good system now. It's transparent. The suggestions on moving some of the dates around, I think that's healthy. It gives us a better flow. But I think that to make major changes of shifting responsibility from from the BET to the council, this is not the right time for it. Thank you.
Lisa, then Dewan.
So I want to adopt a lot of the comments that Jim made, because I do think that in general, and I actually do think that the BET kind of takes the hot tea in the saucer and cools it off to some degree, so that it takes the politics out of the budget to some degree, which I support. And a lot of the comments that Jim said kind of go along those lines. But I also need to push back a little bit on Nora's comment that because we oversee some of the departments, because we're chairs or we're on committees and things like that, I don't think that that gives us a total insight to what their budgetary needs are. I sit on Rec and Parks, and I don't have a huge, super good idea of all of the different equipment they need, what their expenses are, what they spend on gas and things like that. So I feel as though the BET really goes through the details on that, and they're working with the city and the city departments to get that precise type of information that we really don't have access to. So I just wanted to push back on Nora's comment to some degree, that I don't think that simply by overseeing the committees, by Common Council the way we do, that we have an expertise into their budgets in quite the same way that the BET does through its examinations.
Dewan.
Yeah, so I'm just curious to know what big of a change or what big of an impact would this have? I know we've been talking about this for a very long time. I'm still concerned about why we're pushing why a lot of us a few of us is pushing back on this. I'm kind of confused to why, like, what would be the big change, right? Like, what would be the problem with us having more authority? Like, that's where I'm so confused. And Jim, maybe you can answer this, but like, if this, say we all agree and this was to pass and so on and so forth, what do you see it being a problem, Jim, with this process?
Well, it must, most of what's being proposed it's not needed. I mean, we do have a good system. We've got a robust. Do you know of, a good example would be, have you ever asked for information from Jared's department or from the budget area, Tom, and not been able to get the information? No, these guys they're very transparent, and whatever question you want, you can go there and you can get an answer for it.
But that didn't answer the question, and I think this is what you're missing, right? It's like, yes, that's true, but if our constituents is coming to us and saying, okay, this is what we've been fighting for years, and I know, and this is not the case, so it's hypothetically, and we come back and the BET is just, no, it's not a budget, or just refuse to support it.
But the budget does.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. The BET is the BET. I think you really got to understand what they do. And Greg has been on the BET. I've been on the BET. They go through and they look at it from a business perspective. I said this. I've said this. I don't know how many times, but they look at it from a businessman's perspective. How you do a budget. What is it? Why did you ask for what you asked for? Okay. Show me that you really need it. What's going to happen if I don't give you this $10,000 that you're asking for in your budget? Okay. I think I explained to you maybe not to you, Dwan, but the example I give to people is that a department comes in and says, I got $10,000 for business expense. And this was in Parks and Rec a couple of years ago. And I said, okay, fine. How much have you spent? Now we're already in April, and you've only got 2 more months left in the year to go. So how much have you already spent of that $10,000? Well, I only spent $2,000. So where are you going to spend the other $8,000 in the next 2 months? Well, I don't know where I'm going to spend it. I don't think I'm not going to spend it. I'm not going to use it. So, okay, fine. So I'm going to lower your budget. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to lower your budget to $5,000. So that's a $5,000 savings we have. Okay. That's the kind of thing that the BET does. And that guy goes through and he does he does his performance reports at the end of the year, and he comes out and he's right on his budget. and he didn't need that extra money.
So
So
how, but how
basically-
does this proposal affects this type of activity? This is what I'm
Well,
I'm
it
just trying
affects-
to really get a
but-
clear
So
understanding.
I'll explain it to you. So here it is. So he goes one day and says to you on the council and say, hey, Dwan, they just cut my budget by $5,000. Okay. Can you organize the council to get 2/3 of the council together to get my $5,000 back? And you say, yeah, I can do that. And now the council then restores $5,000 in the budget, and we're going to be, and we're going to pass that additional $5,000 expense onto the taxpayers.
But that would, it's 15 of us. You don't think that'd be a hard process? Like, you think someone could just come to a council of 15 and say, like yourself, knowing how the BET work, Greg, knowing how the BET work, can really come to us and say, yeah, we need this $5,000, and if for it not to be a good cause, and we all agree on, you think that really what can happen?
I say it could happen. I didn't say it really would happen. I think that, since you joined the council, I think you're a lot more smarter now than maybe when you started off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I think that's important. But I also think it's going to be, to me, a council of 15 that really has diversity in who we are as a people. It would be hard to convince 8, 9 people to kind of change the budget once we know the expert has looked at it, right? So, and what's the odds of us getting a whole 15 new council member or 8 people that's just could be influenced in that way? I mean, obviously it's possible but happening, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah, so I don't want it. I wouldn't want to push it. That's why I don't like some of the changes that are being proposed. That's all. I don't think it's a problem right now, and I don't think we have to change it. That's all.
Jalen.
Yeah, I think the problem is that people kind of expect us to be able to do something about it anyway. So we don't. People come to us. I mean, since I've been elected, even before I was elected, just being somebody on the outside, people come to us asking us to fund this, fund the schools, or fund IT, or fund these things. And if it's not in the budget and the BET says no, then we can't do anything, and we by default kind of put the blame on the BET, and people do get frustrated because we're the ones that are elected and we're the ones that people vote for. So I think that's kind of the tough part, is because it's kind of a position that people expect us to be able to do something about anyway. And again, it will be kind of difficult to swap, to get the majority vote to switch over and add stuff to the budget, because we understand the ramifications of the tax increases. But I think that it does kind of add some accountability to us, because people come to us to raise or to fund different things anyway. And this kind of just gives us some type of power to do things that we really believe in. So that's just my point.
Let me just comment to Jalen, because I think you bring up an excellent point. And people come to me all the time and complain about the budget. And as I said before, you have to explain to them how the thing works. The reality is that the BET doesn't cut that much. Okay. The BET, if they cut $50,000 out of a $450 million budget, it's a lot. As a matter of fact, I don't think they even did that much this past year. So, to say that the BET is cutting budgets, that's not true at all. It's the mayor and the CFO will come in and review budgets with the BET, and the mayor and the CFO have the final okay on what that budget's going to be. But it's also the BET that takes a look at everything in conjunction of how much we're spending, what is our limit on what we can spend, what is our tax rate going to be. The BET also was kind of instrumental in getting extending our revaluation out for a couple of years, so that we don't get hit with a monumental increase in year one. yeah, we got hit with a lot of increases, but that was because of our revaluation. There's a lot of other factors. The BET is not the factor that's causing taxes to go up. That's not it at all. There's all sorts of other things in there, and once we all understand, to be able to read some of the financial statements, or not the financial statements, but the presentations that Jared presents to us, we can ask them a lot more questions, and we should be able to answer and give our taxpayers, our constituents. I've done it all the time. I went up to West Norwalk and met the association up there, and down in the 6th taxing district, and explained why the taxes were going up. Why is it that they're going up? And went through line by line and explained it to them. They weren't upset that sure, they were upset the taxes going up. Everybody is, but they're not yelling. They're not screaming that we change the process that we have the system that has the system that will tell us, when we're spending too much or when we're not spending enough, etc. Okay. Greg looks at the finance committee meetings. Every finance committee meeting, we look at performance reports from different departments and such. I mean, it's all in there. Okay, I've spoken enough.
Okay.
I have just, whose hand is up? So Chair, I hear you, Jim, and I don't, we have folks on the committee, on the council who are concerned, but may not have the financial acumen that you speak of, that our BET members have. But I think this proposal is speaking to the lack of say that we have in this process. I don't think that it takes anything away from what the BET does or brings, and their expertise is needed. I don't think that we're questioning that. I sometimes think that this is a process thing, and I think we tried to address this issue, and Nora, you can tell me if I'm off point here, when we tried to have the council be more engaged in this overall process, even through our committee meetings, being able to have eyes on the proposed projects that each committee or department is putting forward in their budget. Because for the most part, by the time this information gets to us, there have been several BET meetings, several planning and zoning committee meetings. And as a council, this stuff comes to us when it's well beyond the proposal idea, where they're thinking of things. And so we tried to address this. I think there is some need for us to have some greater involvement or engagement in this, and not taking away anything that the BET brings, not taking away anything that Jared and his department brings to this process. But I think as council people and representatives, yes, we can go and ask for this and ask for that. But as some of you have said, we already spend an inordinate amount of time in meetings. And sometimes this information needs to come to us in a more timely fashion, where we have an opportunity to weigh in earlier. And so I think this is something that we need to talk about. I think Dewan brought up some salient points. And at the end of the day, folks still look at us as council members when things don't go as they expect. But explaining things sometimes, yes, we can do that, but we still are disappointing people. And that's part of what we do. We get it. But I think there's some merit to some of the changes that have been presented by Nora in this process. And that's not to take away anything from what the BET does.
Right.
Because it's
important.
I agree with you.
I agree with you. You and I have always had great conversations together, and I think that you're on track. And I think what I'm hearing from everybody is that constituents out there are upset about it, but we're not addressing their needs in order to explain to them why these things are happening. It's the system. Well, don't blame me, it's the BET. We do in the council, we set the cap. We set the limit of how much they can spend. And we do that, and we're going to have a little bit more time because we're pushing that calendar back a little bit.
Right.
But it's at that time that we get a presentation from Jarrett and from the Board of Ed that we have to ask more questions. You've been to some of the meetings we have. Most of you have been to meetings we've had with the Board of Ed, and I'm the only guy that ever asks a question, or Greg is the only guy that asks a question. Why are you doing this? Why is it this? Why is it that? We've got to be more involved with those people. In our committee meetings, okay, we can ask the same questions of maybe we should have asked at our committee meetings for performance reports. How are we doing? Right. Those are things that give us more information, but we're the ones that set the cap. And so we're putting a limit on how much they can spend. I go to Vanessa and I say, hey, look, did you do your budget? She said, yeah. I said, let's go over it because maybe you're not asking for enough. Okay. And if you have to ask for more, then let's make a cognizant argument that means that you can get it. If you don't get it, maybe there's other reasons because what's going on in the city.
Can I just, before you go on, I think you made a good point. You go to Vanessa, the department head, in your role as chair, and some of those questions could possibly be posed at our committee level under discussion. And I think this is what we were getting at. As soon as the budget is prepared, because listen, we know this whole budget season is more than half of the year, right? That our departments, are gearing up again for the next year. In a couple of, less than 6 months, they're going to be back at this again. And so we need to be in on that level to be able to have conversations, whatever department, recreation and parks, DPW, IT, whatever it is that they are proposing or thinking about for the next fiscal year, we should know about it well before 4 months into that, right? How do we have those conversations? How do we then, as council people, decide or help in that process or have more information in that process? And that might be the way that we start with that.
That's exactly right. I mean, I've seen some of your campaign slogans out there. Let's have get together.
Oh, it's not a campaign slogan. I've been talking that for a while. So,
but seriously, that's true. I mean, we as council people we each are head of a committee. We should be talking to these committees about what they really need.
Right.
And then and also, but the BET it should be a valuable tool for us as well.
Absolutely.
How many of us go to a BET meeting when they're going through some of these budget analysis and listen to what they have to say? I think that we're looking for quick answers and move things around instead of using the system that we have in place right now. And if everybody understands the system we have in place and how it works and how you get information out of it, well, we'll be that much more influential with our constituents and able to tell them what they maybe not what they want to hear, but we can explain to them how it works.
Okay, well, a good place to end is any. I'm sorry, Nora had her hand up, but then I do want to bring this, I want to kind of bring this meeting to a conclusion as we have been here for 3.5 hours.
Sorry, and I won't be long. One thing, so we could put a proposal in to require, we require a meeting with the Board of Ed. We could certainly add requirements that, the departments meet with the council, with the respective committees. So if that's a proposal people want to make, we can put that in. The last thing that I wanted to say is at the end of the day, and I'm just, the fundamental point is the buck should stop with elected officials, in my opinion. And that's really what these last couple proposals are intended, this last provision is intended to do, is to make sure that the buck ultimately stops with an elected official. So I'll end there, Josh.
Okay, so and then just to put a cap on this, because I know we've been talking about 10.7 for a long time. 10.8 seems to more or less stem from 10.7, Nora, unless you disagree with my reading of this.
No, they really are
They're
linked.
very simple. Yeah. 10.16 is we've talked about this. This is the reinstatement suggested language for cap budget. I'm putting this one on the discussion list unless anyone, feels there's a strong consensus. I know that people have expressed different opinions about it before. I'm not casting a judgment here.
Yeah, I don't think there's consensus on it.
So, and then just one other thing, because now we have moved through 10. Article 11, I know there was a disagreement on whether the commission recommends retention of mandatory charter every 5 or 10 years. So that's not going to go on the consensus list. I know people have expressed some disagreements with that. And then otherwise, there were no changes in 12, 13, 14. So, and there have been no amendments to that effect.
So
before we close,
so is Article 11 a discussion item?
Yeah, Article 11 is going to be a discussion item because I know some people were okay with the 5 years and others were more in line with the 10-year thought or some other thought. And instead of having an extended discussion about it now, I think it's going to be something that we're going to have to talk about. First of all, I just want to say that I really appreciate the debate and the thoughtfulness and just how much work a lot of us, have put into this. Obviously singling out particularly Nora, Jalen, and Johan for drafting amendments. But a lot of people have put in a lot of thought, and that's, I don't think there's any doubt our constituents can see that we've been here for 3.5 hours among the other hours we spent at other workshops. I mean, can't say we're not taking this seriously. And I think that's a good thing in and of itself. Obviously, the vote is a week from tomorrow. If you were going to make changes or changes to the proposed amendments or try and give people notice and the ability to read through stuff so that it's not just a surprise on Tuesday. That is my only real main suggestion. Yeah. Oh, Steve.
Can I just say one thing? What I'm going to prepare, and I'll run it by leadership, is I want to make sure we have a draft resolution that everybody will be able to work from. Once we get that done, we'll get it out to everybody so you can see what's on there. I'm going to add one thing that I didn't bring up tonight, but I brought it up before. There are still a couple of sections which have far too much of the old special act language in them. And I simply want you to consider recommending that the commission take a look at that. I've been meeting with Tom Livingston, and we're trying to clean out about half a page of stuff that I think is still too verbose. And so I'll add a provision where appropriate that discusses that. So it shouldn't be a surprise to you, if that's okay. None of it's controversial. It's all really editing and cleaning up.
John, you have a question?
Yeah, so going forward, from now until we get the draft, should we submit whatever thoughts, suggestions we have to Steve? Or what's the thinking?
So the thinking is, I know a lot of people submitted ideas, but you need actual language. And I know that Nora's amendments sort of were an effort to do it in actual statutory language. I believe for Jalen and Johan, their amendments have mostly been proposed as concepts. But I think it needs to be actually in like actual legal language. That would be part of the charter. And so Steve, can help, or any of us can take a look at it too. But that doesn't
it doesn't have to be definitive as long as the
No,
idea
it
is
is, but
laid out. We can, yeah.
It doesn't have to be definitive, but it does need to be, there needs to be something on the page. I think that would be helpful for everyone involved.
Okay, so
Um,
any changes that have come up from today's discussion?
I would
That
implement
that's
those,
okay.
you know, as a way to incorporate the suggestions made here. You know, and obviously Johan, I think that, you know, Greg had that question about sort of the financial impacts with the name change. Just make sure to run it through with Jared and Irene so that we
Sure.
can get a sufficient answer to that question. You know, and Jalen, I think, you know what to do. Nicole.
Hey, just a quick thought. I don't know if we already discussed this. Next Monday is our
Yes,
town
it's the meeting.
committee.
That's right.
Will we have
Sure.
time to caucus on Tuesday?
We'll try. I mean, obviously, you know, usually in this kind of situation where there's a caucus right before a meeting, you know, the agendas are a little lighter. It's not, you know, this is a tough one just given the timing. You know, so TBD. I don't have an answer for you right now on that.
Okay, no problem.
And
Thanks.
that's also why I wanted to make sure that everyone sort of had a chance to be heard on this stuff tonight. Because I don't know if there is going to be a caucus.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Johan.
Last thing, Steve, can we make a request since we see your guitar in the background? Could you just give us or play for us a
Oh
nice
my
little
God.
lullaby before
Oh
we
my God.
At the next meeting.
Thank you.
Maybe
That's the
Stairway
reward
to
for
Heaven.
So
passing.
we have to earn that first.
Yeah. All right, guys. I don't even think I need a motion to adjourn because there were no votes or motions here. So, good night. Thank you all. Get some sleep.
See you on the 22nd.
Thanks
Take
everyone.
care,
Thanks,
guys.
Steve.
Thank
Thanks, Josh.
you.
Good night.
Good night.